Well, welcome to City Hall. We'll get started this morning with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Our invocation will be given by Reverend Joseph Alsay. He's a St. Augustine of Canterbury Episcopal Church. Afterwards, I'll ask Councilman Gary Mars to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone please stand?
Let us pray. God of grace and God of glory, on your people pour thy power. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the facing of this hour. O omnipotent God, whose power is experienced in many places, whose image is seen in many faces, and whose character is known by a variety of names, we praise you for the grace you have given us as this day unfolds, like flowers of rare beauty, bestowing upon all blessings in abundance. During this season of the year, when we are surrounded by signs and symbols of love, life, and light, we lift up before you the needs of all of humankind, and we trust your providential hand will supply their needs. We pray for your shalom over this city and commit into your hands Mayor Cornett, the council, the city management, the department heads, and everyone who holds authority in this fine city. We trust you to guide their every action as it relates to the decisions that affect your people, and beseech you to pour upon them the wisdom, righteousness, and protection that comes from on high. Through our work together, may we help to bring to this city peace where there is stress, hope where there is despair, prosperity where there is lack, and healing where there are broken hearts and illness. Finally, in all that we do and say, may we always hold in high honor the dignity of every human being, so that liberty will be protected and brotherhood will be our ultimate goal. May your kingdom come and your will be done in Oklahoma City. We ask this in the name of the loving Creator of us all. Amen.
Amen. Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we want to recognize the Devon Holiday River Parade winners. Mike McAuliffe is here. Mike, you want to stand up and come forward and tell us about all the excitement that took place on the Oklahoma River?
Well, we had another exciting and successful Holiday River Parade. This is the 6th parade we've held on our Oklahoma River. And Mayor and Council, I think the one thing about this event is we are up against both weather and OU football that night and probably a half dozen other activities. But we still had a great crowd at Wiley Post and at the Boathouse District. And I just think it goes to show when, with the help of the city and our other sponsors like Devon, when we can do a quality family event like this, people really turn out and enjoy it, and they appreciate it. We would like to give out a few awards, and I might also add that as part of the River Parade, we do put some funds back into the River Foundation, and after 6 river parades after this year, that fund has grown to over $500,000. So eventually, when we get the fund to $1 million, the plan is to start spinning off projects to do things along the river to support the river from this River Parade. So it's a free family event, plus we're raising money, so we're making it work. I'd like to thank 4 departments with the city that really help us. Of course, all the city helps us, but the police, fire, parks, and public works really give us a lot of support and help to pull this event off. Also, I'd just like to mention our other major sponsors. Of course, Devon, our title sponsor, Bank First, Chesapeake Energy, Chickasaw Nation, and Oklahoma City Riverfront Redevelopment Authority. And with that, Mayor, if you would help us, we'll hand out just a few of the awards. Some of the winners are here, and we'll recognize those. And Pat Downs from the Riverfront Authority will help us, and Christina Raycott, representing Devon, will help us. And again, and there's a few people, Councilman Mars has helped volunteer on this for the last, every year of the parade. He was our Grand Marshal this year, so we're honored to have Gary with us. And he doesn't always like me taking on these new projects because he knows he'll probably be helping one way or the other, but I appreciate Gary and everybody's support that was a part of this. Starting with the, I'm going to read the winners, and then some of our first place winners are here, and those are the ones we'll present trophies to. In the nonprofit category, third place was the Boathouse District. Second place was the Crow Creek Neighborhood Association. First place was the Downtown Rotary Club, celebrating their 100th birthday. And representing the Downtown Rotary Club today is Jeff Simpson, the immediate past president of the Downtown Rotary. We can applaud. And you can take it with you. You can take it with you. And I also like to recognize James Thomas from USA Shade, who kind of helped us with that Rotary entry, so thanks, JT, for being a part of that. The next category is a small business category. David and Jody Ratton, I don't think, well, they're not here, they're third place. It's a gingerbread float. Second place was Tom Wood. And first place was Dwayne Harmon. Now, I don't think they're here today, but what was interesting about this entry at the River Parade is the owner of the boat actually proposed to his girlfriend out on the river when they came to center stage. So they may be on their honeymoon today, I don't know, but we'll get their trophy to them. But that was kind of unique for our River Parade. The next category was a corporate category, and third place was Holmesy Law Firm. Second place was really a number of our sponsors, including Bank First and the other major sponsors. And then the first place was River Cruiser Pioneer, which was sponsored by Devon Energy. So Christina will represent Devon, and the other thing I might mention, Mayor and Council, is the other thing we do as part of our River Parade is we provide the decorations for the river cruisers. And so they decorate the cruisers, and they, of course, the decorations stay on all through, till New Year's. So that's another thing that we're proud we can donate back to the city, is decorating the cruisers. The major awards, the Chairman's Award goes to the David Eckert family for the Peanut Gang entry. And I know there's a few of them here for this award. And the little one's very shy, Mayor. Thank you all. The Grand Marshal's Award goes to, I don't know if they're here, to Terry Townsend and family. Are y'all here? And we'll make sure they get their award. And then the granddaddy of them all, the Mayor's Award, and Davis Sports Center's won this every year, Mayor. And if you saw one of the floats outside, that's just one of the airplanes they actually built. They had two airplanes, the Snoopy and the Red Baron, and Snoopy actually was shooting down the Red Baron across the water, and they had the machine guns going. They had smoke coming up under the Red Baron, and the lights go off, and they spent I don't know how many weeks building their two airplanes, but that's just one of them out there. And so it was definitely a highlight of the River Parade, and David never disappoints us. Come on, the whole group.
We got everybody up. Okay.
I didn't do it by myself. We got Dave Bowery, Earl Hill, and Dennis Ladner, and about 30 interviews. We're just a little shy. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Hang on to that rope on there. We need to get a glue gun to fix that rope on there, David. Mayor, that's it. And again, without people like David Sports Center, a handful of volunteers to do this event, we couldn't do it, and we couldn't do it without the city's support. So thanks again, and thanks to Devon and all of our sponsors.
We're very appreciative, Mike. Thank you, and thanks to Devon. Pat, thank you for all you do down on the river. And Christina, thank you for Devon's sponsorship once again. It's a wonderful event. And it's certainly it's better when the weather cooperates, but I heard great things.
I've got to tell you that I asked them where the Red Baron was, and they said, well, he got shot down, so he's down there at the bottom of the river somewhere, I guess. But I asked them about it. I said, what in the world are you going to do to top it next year? And they said they started the day after this year's parade, planning for next year. So you never know what they're going to bring out. I mean, it could be a monorail. It could be just about anything shows up, it seems like. So it's a great time, and I know that Santa's sleigh had a little trouble this year. Nobody's fault, but I'm sure he'll be going up and down the river next year when it all happens. So appreciate it.
We're on item 3A of the council agenda. It's the appointment of Michael Barber to the Stockyard City Urban Design Committee. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. On to item 4, this is the Journal of Council Proceedings. Item A is to receive the Journal of Council Proceedings for December 14th, and item B is to approve the Journal of Council Proceedings for December 7th. A motion and a second. Comments or questions on the Journal? All right, cast your votes. And it passes unanimously. And item 5 is request for uncontested continuance.
None this morning, Mr. Mayor.
Well, anybody else have a request for an uncontested continuance? Then we'll move on to recess the council meeting and convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority, where we have 5 items. Comments or questions on the MFA? All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn OCMFA, convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. There are 2 items. We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions on the PPA? All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCPPA, convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust. There is 1 item. We have a motion and a second to advance the OCEAT. Any comments or questions? All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCEAT and reconvene the council meeting with the consent docket. All right, we have a motion and a second. Are there any individual considerations to consider?
You know, I have a few minor questions on item 6C and M. M is in mother.
Yeah, Larry?
Yeah, AG and AH, Your Honor.
AG and AH. All right. All right, Pat, you want to go ahead and get us started with 6C and M?
6C, Your Honor, I just was curious what we were really doing here.
This is a
Bicycle rental program. It didn't seem like that was the city function particularly, but
Okay. This is a program. We're going to bring back a city manager report to explain this to you in more detail, but this is a program where we'd be able to have bikes in the downtown area that you could pick up, drive to another location, drop them off. A lot of cities are going to these type of things, and helps for walkability, movability in the downtown area. And this is funded through our EECBG, Energy and Environment Community Block Grant dollars.
is there an overall thought that perhaps someday this will be taken over by some kind of a private entity and get the city out of this business?
We can see, generally, it's not a cost to the citizens for the, well, it is a cost, obviously, through the program, but not an individual cost as you go. You'd get the bike,
right.
You put your credit card in, and then when you return the bike, it would be debited back to you, or credited back to you, excuse me.
This is a federal program.
Well, I've seen it in other countries.
Right.
It appears to work well, but I wonder if, if this is something that ultimately we might have a private sector person administering rather than have the city doing it.
We'll look into that as we go forward.
It would seem like that might be more appropriate because
You're saying federally funded but privately operated? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm not sure exactly how the dynamics of that would work, but I think I'm not sure the city has a big role in providing bicycles for people to ride. I mean, I think it's a good idea, but I think we need to rethink our role in that particular operation.
Okay, thank
There's
you.
no revenue stream, correct, Jim?
That's correct.
So that'd be really hard for the private sector to do that.
Well, we maybe if it's paid for by the federal government, we could pay them from federal government money. But I just hesitate for the city to take on the responsibility of administering still another program, given the fact that our resources are stressed as they are.
Any other comments or questions? Larry, AG and AH?
Your Honor, I'd have just M while I've got my mic turned on. I can't forget it anyway. On M, we're taking money rather out of the street and alley cash fund, and I was under the misunderstanding perhaps that there was no money in it this year. I wondered if we were refurbishing it or putting money back into it, or there was some money in it that I was unaware of.
Councilman, you and I have had some conversations about this before. Yeah, the street and alley cash fund level is dropping, but there's still some money in there, and that's where the money to fund this contract is coming from.
So there's still a possibility, if there's a little bit of money in it, we could do some of these joint venture projects with the county?
There's a possibility. We just need to be very careful about what we're going to do with it.
Well, we want to get the best bang for our buck. But
correct.
We had some, I thought, some pretty effective, from a cost standpoint, projects, joint projects with the county that we were having to forego because of a shortage of funds. And this seems like this might be an opportunity for us to relook at those. I would encourage you to do that.
Would it be helpful if I got you a summary of what we have in that fund right now and see what the possibilities are?
Yes, sir, it would be good. Thank you very much. I would appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Larry?
Yeah, and Jim, help me out here. I think it's important that the council and people get brought up to date on some of the progress that's been made on the MAPS 3 projects. AG is a resolution giving staff the approval to negotiate a contract with Populous GSB, a consulting firm, for the express purpose of determining a site for the convention center. There was a very thorough process that went through with staff evaluating a number of proposals. This was their decision, and the Oversight Committee last Thursday affirmed that decision. Interesting timetable that's possible with this. Should things move along as planned, staff would be negotiating that contract during the month of January, I believe, bringing it back both to the Oversight Committee and to this body for approval.
That's correct.
And if that's happened, they're forecasting probably a 90 to 120-day period for the consultant to make his or her recommendation concerning the location for the convention center site. So you're looking at some decision in the April-May timeframe possibly that for us to discuss as to where the convention site will actually be. And then AH is the purchase of some land in the Central Park area. These plots of land, several of them are needed for the Skydance Bridge in order to get that going. The progress in acquiring land is moving forward in that area. And as you know, if you've been by there, the post office is under demolition as we speak. So there is progress going on in the Central Park area. So those are AG and AH. And Jim, if you'd like to add anything to that?
I think you summarized it well. Obviously, the priority on the park right now is we're working on the North Park area, but we did have a couple of key parcels that we needed to acquire to accommodate the construction of the Oklahoma City Skydance Bridge, and so we're getting that accomplished. Other parcels are being pursued of that on the North Park also, and that's a significant contract with Populous to do the convention center siting. And again, that doesn't mean we're going to do the convention center right away, but as the planning process goes on, it's important that we identify that site early on.
Well, that's a very good distinction. This is not to say that the convention center will be, what its priority is, because that has not been determined, but we've got to know where it's going to be when we get around to building it, and that's what this is intended to do.
Your Honor, in that regards, the convention center site, I would hope that the council would be involved at early stages in the review of that consultant's report, so that we would have the benefit of understanding his rationale and the criteria he's used to make a recommendation before it becomes just an up or down decision by the council.
We'll make sure you're briefed on it appropriately.
Larry, did you take care of both of yours? Okay, Sam, J and K.
Thank you, Mayor. Both of these call attention to some of our pedestrian connectivity projects, and in both cases, the planning staff, in a very alert way, are taking advantage of some of the ODOT, Department of Transportation, special transportation enhancement funds. The first one, J, is a activity that our Neighborhood Conservation Committee has worked with over the past 2 to 3 years. It's an area of near northwest. It's called the Near Northwest Alliance between 23rd Street and I-44 and Pennsylvania on the west to I-235 or Broadway Extension. But within that area are 6 schools, 8 parks, 11 neighborhood associations, and a handful of institutions, churches, schools that have partnered and worked together to develop a master plan for pedestrian connectivity to these 6 schools and 8 parks. A really intense, comprehensive effort. The Neighborhood Conservation Committee has helped to advance some beginning funding for some of the sidewalk extension, and then these funds will be enhancement funds from the Department of Transportation to add another 3.5 miles of connectivity, again, between parks and schools. Plan calls for 21 miles of sidewalk connectivity and a very concerted, intense, and directed planning effort, working closely with the Planning Department and, again, 11 neighborhood groups over the past 2 to 3 years. And I commend the planning staff for taking advantage again and making, I know it's just the application stage for these funds. And somewhat in the same vein, K has to do with a downtown project, expanding connectivity, establish new patterns of walking and biking, and narrowing some of the wider streets. I noticed just in narrowing wider streets, noticed a project this past weekend. It was at a wedding in Fort Myers, Florida, and drove downtown to see some of the changes downtown. And they have taken some of the older streets, main streets of downtown that didn't need the 4 lanes, and instead of just narrowing them to 2 lanes with sidewalks, they, in some instances, created some additional parking by taking a lane and bumping out these islands about every half block, and then nice landscape, and then between the bump out islands, use that former lane, street lane, for angled parking. Nice, slow driving, calming effect through there, and didn't seem to be congestion when I was there, but just a nice effect. And I think these are perhaps some of the ways that we're going to be looking at some of the downtown areas. So, again, just wanted to call attention to the fact that our planning staff are availing the city of some good opportunities with some special Department of Transportation enhancement funds to do these projects.
All right.
Your Honor, may I ask a favor of the city manager? I appreciate Sam bringing these up. These are interesting projects, but for just reading them, it's a little difficult sometimes to tell because there's so many streams of money coming in, and there's matches mentioned of very different kinds and different amounts. I wonder if we could get some kind of overall report on our sidewalk plans showing a source of funds and how we're going to pay for them, where they're going to be, and the criteria that was used to select these particular sites. Nothing in a lot of detail, but just sort of a view from 40,000 feet to have a better feeling for what our entire approach is and how they all go together and how it's going to be funded.
I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Manager, will we be qualifying and will we be applying for these same funds, or will the same program be in existence for the 2011 budget programs?
We don't know that for sure, but it's probable.
So we will be...
Well, we don't know that the program will be there, but if it is, we will be trying to take advantage of it.
Well, I would like to ditto Councilman Ryan's concerns as it relates to some of the sidewalks in some areas. It just seems like that, you know, we brag about the fact that we're getting these funds, but it seems in some areas that there's such a disjoint in reference to connecting sidewalks where there's some that started and then there's a break off, and you know, some areas it looks like that would take just a small amount of labor and funding if we have these funds to go out and connect some of these sidewalks that have been started in some for whatever funding we had, and then it was stopped. And then you have these gaps that exist in some of the neighborhoods that it just seems like, you know, you would go out and try to make sure all of those are connected before we start doing some new sidewalks. And that's the concern I have. I think it's kind of what Councilman Ryan was talking about, and there are some that, have been done, and it's been done very well, but we have some areas that there's a sidewalk, and then all of a sudden there's no sidewalk, and then you go a half a block, and then the sidewalk starts again. And so you have these gaps that exist that, it just seems like we would go out and try to survey those areas to make sure that all those that had been started are now connected, as opposed to starting brand new sidewalks.
I appreciate that, and it's a very valid comment that you make. We didn't require sidewalks to be built in this community for 40, 45, 50 years, and we're in a deep hole, and we need to be smart, and as we come out of that, it's going to take a long time, and we need to be smart and hit the areas of higher priority. And so we'll get back with you on the information on both of Mr. Kelly's and Mr. Ryan's requests.
Mayor, I appreciate that Councilman Ryan bringing this up, because when we take that big picture look, it may be time to lead us into some discussion, as well as Councilman Kelly's concern, about the older existing neighborhoods in terms of repair and replacement of existing sidewalks. Because Councilman Ryan has suggested in the past, we may be able to rethink how we do those with respect to some shared participation in such things as sidewalk assessment districts, where there's a participatory opportunity between the city, between the residents that front the sidewalk and the city, in some kind of amortization payout plan. So when we look at the big picture, I think that's a piece that we probably need to add to the discussion. Some thought about how we're going to address older sidewalk areas that need repaired and
We've had
replaced.
some success with neighborhood associations coming up with their own plan and presenting it to us, and
Yes.
we've been a partner. And so I think to the extent that we can communicate that, if there are neighborhoods out there that can get a strong consensus about what they'd like and present it to us, it allows us. But it's hard for us to proactively go back into these areas and try to put that consensus together.
It is, and in fact, that's what we're doing with these 11 neighborhood associations. Exactly what we're doing. But in terms of areas the older areas that have it, I think the street assessment district is a different direction than we thought about.
Okay. Larry?
Yeah, but and I don't want to confuse things too much, but there is, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, $10 million in MAPS 3 that will be designated for sidewalks. And I thought we had, in the MAPS 3 proposal, had kind of indicated that they would be spread around town and would be used to provide walkability to public facilities like schools or libraries or things like that. And the subcommittee for trails and sidewalks has been constituted under MAPS 3. They have met, and I think city staff is doing some preparatory work on getting with them as far as where those sidewalks might be placed, and that information will be coming back through the oversight committee to us to look at as to where that money will be spent. So that sidewalk walkability, if you will, is going on while we're talking here.
I think that has to be part of the overall picture that I was talking about. I think it's a good point, Larry. And I think Sam brought up a great point. And I think, from my standpoint, I wasn't talking so much about putting in sidewalks where sidewalks did not exist. I think that's a different issue. But I think one of the aspects of a decaying neighborhood is a decaying infrastructure. And one of maybe the simplest, quickest things we can do is to improve or replace, repair old, broken down sidewalks. Because I think when you drive into an area, you see cracked sidewalks that are heaving because of trees that were planted years ago. I think it just contributes significantly to the feeling it is a decayed area. And I think that's one thing we might get a pretty good return on our investment if we go in and replace some of those sidewalks that have failed. And you can make an analogy, I think, that we replace streets that fail because we want to have transportation available. And if we were talking about making this a more walkable city, it's, to me, an easy jump to go from improving and repairing sidewalks that have failed as well.
It seems to me generally our policy that we're kind of moving in the direction is that we're connecting neighborhoods to public buildings. We're not really going inside the neighborhoods and fixing the older sidewalks inside of neighborhoods. But we're trying to connect neighborhoods. So that would be another step that I think we'd all like to do if there's a way to fund it. But the amount of money that it would require is got to be astronomical.
We spend a lot of money on neighborhood improvement now. We do it on a haphazard method. We'll put in a sign indicating this is such and such a subdivision one place for $10,000. We'll put in a half a dozen street lights someplace else for $10,000 or $15,000. And I think if we took a step back and looked at the impact of the money we're spending, we might get more value for our dollars by infrastructure improvements. And I'm not sure that we wouldn't be able to get some cooperation from some of the property owners, and it would be a shared investment. It wouldn't be solely the cities.
Jim, if the money were there, would we have to get permission from all of the property owners on a street to go in and fix a sidewalk in an older part of the city?
I don't know if I can give you the answer on that. There are some legal Can you say no? There is in the right-of-way, obviously.
As long as it's on the easement, we wouldn't.
I think the question is it necessarily the city's responsibility, though, to go ahead and replace all those? Is the property owner's responsibility? And I think that's where we get into
So it almost becomes an extension of their driveway. We don't fix people's driveway if it starts to crack, and the sidewalk, to some extent, becomes the homeowner's responsibility. Is that, in general, the theory?
You can do street assessment districts for sidewalks, too.
But typically it's the property owner's responsibility for sidewalk replacement.
And that's a policy we've established over the years. And it's a policy, I understand, not a regulation or a law.
Right.
We can change that policy if we deem it important enough to do so.
Yep. Anybody else want to weigh in? Okay.
I wanted to make, not on this, I'm finished with this issue, but I had a question on Ale.
Okay.
This is final plans and specifications to be advertised for bids for athletic field improvements. And Edwards Park is one of the parks that's in Ward 7, and I would just like to see if Wendell or someone could give me some information as to what those improvements will be as it relates to Edwards Park.
Larry, do you know those? Dennis, Larry's back there.
I don't know the specifics on that, and Larry might be able to help out.
We'll get that information to you, Councilman.
All right, ready to vote the consent docket? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Nothing on the concurrence docket today, so we move into item 8. These are items that require a separate vote. Item 8A is an issue in Ward 3. It's a street closing. It's over kind of by the airport. Larry, you okay with this?
Yes, but I think that the council might like just an overview briefing on what this is involved and what's going on at the airport. Okay. Mark Cranenberg is here, and I've asked Mark to come forward and just kind of give the council a brief synopsis of what's going on.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, Council. Mark Cranenberg, Airports Director, and this action item represents actually the first step in the airport's initiative to develop the east side of Will Rogers World Airport, roughly 900 acres extending from southwest 54th Street south to southwest 104th Street. This particular item closes the Portland right-of-way from southwest 89th Street south to 104th Street, and also 89th Street from I-44 to the existing Portland Avenue. I want to also note that the Public Works Department is in a consultant selection process now through joint funding with the city and the Airport Trust. Portland Avenue will be relocated. That is a part of our East Side Development Plan, but this is the first step to go forward to close these right-of-ways. I also want to note that in the 1990s, Portland was closed and vacated by the county north of 89th Street and also southwest 74th Street. Now, Portland Avenue, the existing Portland today, will not be closed with roadblocks after you take this item. Public Works will continue to maintain these roads as they have in the past years to a serviceable condition, but I do want to note that because Southwest 89th Street is in such poor condition, that one has been physically closed. However, through the airport's plan for its roadways in that area, eventually a portion of Southwest 89th Street will be reconstructed between I-44 and the new relocated Portland. which will be a few hundred feet west of I-44. So very important step for our project going forward.
Thank you, Mark. I don't believe anybody has signed up. Nobody protested at the Planning Commission. Unless the council has some more questions, I move for approval.
All right, we're voting on item 8A. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8B is to call for city council elections for wards 2, 5, 6, and 8. We have a motion and a second. I guess first we'll vote on item 8B1. This is the resolution that calls for the holding of these primary elections. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. And then item 8B2 is the proclamation. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8C is a budget amendment on several different topics.
Mayor, this covers really four primary items. The first is to take some money out of the Cities and Schools Capital Use Tax Fund for public safety capital. It's primarily to replace some mobile data computers, and it's also to do some refurbishment and replacement of the police and fire fleet, primarily due to hail damage that we received this year during the hailstorm. A number of both fire and police, but predominantly police cars were damaged through that event. The second item is $9.7 million out of the debt service fund, and we do that annually, and that aligns our budget amount with the amounts approved by the county excise board. So that's to bring that into alignment. We're also allocating $4.5 million out of the hotel motel tax fund for capital improvements at the fairgrounds. And lastly, of the major items, is $1.4 million for the budget for new bids as we go forward. And so those are the major items in the budget amendment.
Well, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on item 8C? All right. Council ready? Cast your votes. Budget amendment passes. On to item 8D. This is also a public hearing to further the process of establishing the new downtown bid.
This is a public hearing and the next step in the process. AJ, you want to give us a little bit of a quick summary as to what we're doing this morning?
AJ Kirkpatrick, the Planning Department. I'm the staff person for the downtown bid. This is the first of two public hearings that will come before the council. This first public hearing is on the creation of the district, and the second one, which is probably going to occur sometime in February, is on the setting of the level of assessment. So this would be basically, if you were to pass the resolution before, you'd be creating the district and accepting the engineer's report that was presented the last time we were at council.
All right. We're on item 8D, and this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on item 8D? All right. Comments or questions from council? Ready to go?
Move it. Second.
Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 8E deals with the policy of managing the city's assets.
Mayor, either Bob, Laura, are you going to come up and talk about this, or? Laura Johnson, our Finance Director.
Good morning. The item included in your packet is a strike-through version so that you can see all of the changes that have been made. Several months ago, we advertised for proposals for investment advisory services for the city as a whole. We have these services for some of our trusts, but this is the first time we've really entered into this idea for the city. What we're hoping to do is be able to improve our investment performance. In accordance with state law and city policy, we'll keep our investments in the same kind of conservative vein that we always have. In fact, you'll note that in your changes that there are no changes to the types of investments that we can use. But we're hoping that having access to a better vetting process for our broker-dealers and having more access to larger funds that will be able to participate in those and gain returns from that practice. So in order to do that, though, we really need to be more specific and more clear in our investment policy. The funds will remain in the custody of the city treasurer, but the policy changes will allow for an advisor to participate in that process.
All right. Comments or questions for Laura?
I'll congratulate him on not including derivatives as an additional investment option. That's sort of a slippery slope to get on.
We're just going to let Orange County, California do that. We're going to stay away from those.
We're on item 8E1. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8E2, similar issue. Comments or questions on item 8E2? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8F is a resolution to negotiate an agreement for those preceding issues.
Mayor.
Oh, that was item 2. We're on item 8F, which is a resolution from the Zoo Trust.
Mayor, we have Dwight Scott here this morning and Dana McCrary from the Oklahoma City Zoo Society, and they've got a PowerPoint presentation that I think is actually going to cover items F, G, and H, and then we can come back and handle each of the items individually, but they've got a comprehensive presentation this morning.
Great.
If Dwight can get it up.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see you again. I will address two of the items on your agenda, the new master plan and the proposed gate increase, and then I'll introduce Dana McCrory, and she will discuss the modifications to the fundraising agreement. Start off, we spent about 7 months this year working on a new zoo master plan. The project was led by PJA out of Seattle, a zoo-focused master planning group, a great group to work with. They had a really diverse team. There was a strong theme park operational expertise on that group. And we also had some great support from GSB, a local architect, and also from Smith Roberts Balderschweiler on the engineering front. We had a very inclusive process building our master plan. We invited all of our zoo staff members to participate, and our zoo trustees, and OZS board members as well. So it was a great process. This is an overhead shot of the zoo to help you get your bearings a little bit. To the right is the zoo parking lot, and then at the bottom of the shot there is Zoo Lake, or looking back east from the zoo. The elephant project is underway, and as you all know, that will be opening this spring. That's kind of the gold block there on the lower left-hand side. That large section there in the middle is what we call Expedition Asia, and those two items there will complete our current zoo master plan. The next major project in our master plan will be a new veterinary hospital. We're very excited to have the support and interest from the Kirkpatrick Foundation to move that project forward. And then we're going to focus our efforts more towards the center of the zoo, and that blue strip you see there next to that yellow area. That is a combined giraffe exhibit, event center, and new restaurant. And I will speak more about that in just a moment. The next major project that we will tackle is the new herpetarium. With the opening of a new restaurant, we will be able to convert our current restaurant to a new herpetarium. And we have a great collection of reptiles and amphibians at the zoo, and I know it's a little interesting for some people to think we're converting our restaurant to a snake building, but yes, we are, and it will work, and it'll be a fabulous facility. And then the last major project in our new master plan will be the renovation of the Noble Aquatic Center. When that facility was open, that was a state-of-the-art facility, a high-energy area for the zoo. But by the time we get to the end of this master plan, it'll be almost 30 years old, or actually over 30 years old, so we really need to put some resources into that. So those are the four major projects of our new master plan. The veterinary hospital, I threw this slide in. I hope you can see this clearly. This is a photo from the Cleveland Metro Park Zoo. They have a veterinary hospital that guests can actually look into. And I took this photo from inside of a surgery room, and you can tell they have somewhat of a sense of humor. There's a stuffed lion there on the surgery table. But those windows at the far side of that room, that looks out into a guest area. So guests can come into the hospital, watch procedures going on in the room, and learn a little bit about the great lengths that we go through to deliver great animal care to the animals at the zoo. This is a closer version of that giraffe restaurant event center I mentioned earlier. It's right off the front of the zoo, and it's really going to be the main thing you see when you come into the zoo, a big mixed species African hoofstock area. This is a rendering of what that will actually look like. So that rendering on the left, it's a heavily themed African lodge. That top level, the second level, will be the restaurant, and lower level will be the event center. And you can see you have quite a view looking out into that exhibit from those facilities. And that hut-like structure down on the lower portion of that rendering on the left, that is a deck where you can actually feed the giraffe. So that'll be a very exciting ways that our guests can interact with the giraffe. You know, they're very big and beautiful animals, and it's going to be a really powerful connection there. The master plan is a very comprehensive document. We have many components that are important. The first thing there you see is our business plan. You know, without the numbers backing up our vision for the zoo, it's really just a dream. And we believe we have a very strong business plan. And sustainability, of course, is important to us as a conservation organization. We want to do what we can do to minimize our footprint for sure. We had a very thorough facility assessment done, which has been very helpful, not only in terms of moving the large projects forward, but smaller projects as well. It has really helped us prioritize where we want to invest our dollars. And horticulture collections map, we are an accredited botanical garden. We're one of only 8 facilities in the country that have the accreditation as a zoo and as a botanical garden. Most of that collections map, in terms of the master plan, is used just to denote areas that we do not want to develop. There are some large, significant trees we want to preserve, and large clusters of trees as well. And then finally, treatment of historic elements. We really want to be careful as we're building new interactive exhibits that we are respecting the past as well, and make a strong connection between where we've been and where we're headed. So we're going to respect those elements and try to refurbish as many as we can and incorporate those into our current vision moving forward. Any questions on the master plan? I tried to be brief, but hit the highlights. If there's no questions, I'll go ahead.
What's the time framing? When can our citizens expect these capital improvements to be completed?
The Expedition Asia, following the elephant exhibit, we're looking at a 2013 completion. The veterinary hospital, we're looking at probably at the end of 2013, 2014-ish timeline, Mayor. And then for the giraffe area, we're looking at a 2015 opening. The new herpetarium is 2017. And then finally, the Noble Aquatic Center will be 2019. And that will complete our next 10 years. And there were a few other items on that phasing strategy you might have noticed that go out past that timeline. Well, we will revisit the timeline at that point at the end of 10 years and decide if we want to continue doing some of those projects or not. So some of those will just serve as placeholders on that map.
Okay.
Mayor, I have a question.
Yeah.
Just mainly a point of curiosity. There's not sales tax charged on gate admission, correct? Is there sales tax charged on gate admission?
No.
Okay.
No.
Just out of curiosity, what is the thought process on tax-exempt and non-tax-exempt organizations getting different pricing?
We've always done it that way.
Great.
I really don't know. I'm just being honest with you. I don't really know the logic behind that. That's how we've always set that up, just to work with tax-exempt organizations. I'd be happy to revisit that.
I would assume the 40 cents difference is just random?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead, Dwight. You're going to talk about the fee changes.
Sure. We are currently at $7 for adult admission, $4 for children, and $4 for senior citizens. And we're proposing an increase on $1 at each one of those levels. So we go 8, 5, and 5. And the first thing that comes to mind when we discuss a gate increase is being respectful to the citizens. You know, we have a 1/8 cent sales tax dedicated solely to the zoo. No sunset on the tax. It is absolutely incredible. And to be respectful of that, we want to make sure that we're not charging too much to get into our zoo. I have a few, first I'll start with the reasons for the proposed increase. Our master plan called for a gate increase with the opening of our children's zoo last year, but due to the declining economy, we decided not to do the increase at that time. However, this year with the opening of the elephant exhibit, this will be 2 years in a row we've opened a major attraction, and our operational costs are continuing to go up. So now we believe it's an appropriate time, and we can justify it with the opening of 2 major exhibits. We have not had an increase since 2006, and I do have a few slides to show you how we compare with zoos around the country in terms of admission, and also some of our local attractions as well.
What's your what percentage of your revenues is from the gate?
percentage of revenue from the gate, we are about 56% right now. So our admission fee is currently at $7. There are 221 accredited zoos in North America, and those zoos that have a budget of $7 million or more are on this list, so there are 57 of those. And that is where we rank in terms of admission fee, tied for 53rd, basically, with the Fresno Zoo. So I think we have incredible value for the size and complexity of our facility. And I think if we go up $1, we're still on the end of that spectrum, which is where we want to continue to be. But I still think we have incredible value compared to our peers. And the same thing locally. National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, $12.50 for adults. Oklahoma City Museum of Art, $12. Science Museum Oklahoma, $10.95 for the museum only. And you see the Oklahoma City Zoo on there for $7. And I think those other facilities are adequately priced as well. I enjoy going there and certainly have a great time with my family.
Dwight, how many free days do you have?
Well, I have 2 slides here, Councilman Kelly, for free days. We have a lot, and to be honest, I didn't know we had
popped up.
We had so many, yeah.
Are you paid staff for prompting the next slides?
Thank you for the segue, sir. December, January, and February, we had free admission days. We have many special promotions throughout the year, Mother's Day, Father's Day. Those are free with one paid admission as well. Sales Tax Appreciation Day, of course, we're free to everyone. I love the pumpkin drive event. If you bring a pumpkin larger than a head, you get in the zoo for free as well. A free admission for all veterans on Veterans Day, and then we're 50% off for all members of the military throughout the rest of the year. Day before Thanksgiving, we're always free. We have great partners in the community who help us with many special promotions. Bring a Dr. Pepper can and receive a free admission. Bank of Oklahoma, Metro Family Magazine, Key Family Magazine, or Key Magazine, the travel guide, I'm sorry. Many different opportunities for free admission. Zookeeper Appreciation Week, I like that one. Free admission for children if they bring a drawing of their favorite animal. We get some great drawings, if you can imagine. And then an important point to make, I think, is that we allow guests to bring in food and drinks, and I think we're pretty rare in that regard. So if you were coming on one of these special occasions where you had to pay for an adult and children get in free, 2 adults and 2 kids get in the zoo for $16, bring your food and your drinks, and you can stay all day and have a great time. This does not include all of our discount admission days. We have many of those as well. One of the most popular is Wayback Wednesday, where it's only $1 to get into the zoo during the summertime. Also $1 for a soda, $1 for a hot dog, and $1 for popcorn as well.
Have you made a few changes this year, added a few gimmies?
We are actually getting ready to roll out a new program called Kids Choice, and that will allow kids to pick someone in their family or a friend or whatever, and with their paid admission, they get to bring someone along with them. That's a brand new program we're just rolling out.
Mayor, when I had the opportunity just in small groups, as each of us did, to visit with Dana and Dwight, just to me, there's no question that this zoo is moving to a state of excellence. You know, you talk San Diego Zoo, and then after that, I mean, we're right there. We're right up there. And the fact that you two, the society and the zoo, has worked so well together in the last few years in terms of membership fees. That isn't an issue, that you seriously listened to the council's concerns 4 or 5 years ago, making those kind of improvements. My point in saying all that is back to this slide. I think the more creative, and I'm beginning to see some of it that I didn't see a year ago, that we can be with some of these opportunities, because it's not a matter for me whether it's $6, $7, $8 at the gate, whether we raised it $1. It's just that some families, even at that level, times 4 kids, is going to be a $25 to $30 admission. So for some of those, they're going to think twice and maybe not be able to do it too often. Yet they're the ones that pay the 1/8 cents, like we all do, to make this the class zoo that it is. I just think the more we can promote and continue to tweak and provide opportunities for those folks that otherwise are going to be priced out at any price at the gate is just very important PR for the zoo, and it feels like you're continuing to do that, and I appreciate that and just encourage you to continue to make some of those creative opportunities. Thank you, Dwight.
Have you thought about maybe doing something along what Sam was saying, where maybe a child that has say a 3.5 GPA or something can bring a report card in at any time during the year and get in free?
That's a great idea.
Something to not only allow them to come in, but rewarding them for hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great idea. We definitely want to build our connections with local schools, and Dana will speak more to that here momentarily, but we want to do a better job of strengthening that connection for sure. That's a good idea.
All right, Dwight.
Well, before I turn it over to Dana, I have to give you an update on the elephants. We receive an incredible amount of inquiries from citizens asking about elephants. This is a photo from their new facility, and that is Chandra on the right. She is the youngest of the two, and that is Asha on the left, and she is the female who is pregnant. And they're both doing very, very well. So if everything goes as planned with the gestation process, we believe that we'll have an elephant calf here in Oklahoma City for the first time ever in May of next year. So we're really looking forward to that. So we'll have a big year coming up for elephants. We'll have the exhibit opening in the spring, hopefully an elephant calf in May, and then we'll be bringing in a large elephant bull approximately that same time. So we have a lot of great things going on with elephants. Well, that's all I have. I appreciate it. I will turn it over to Dana. Dana McCrory is the Executive Director of the Zoological Society. She's been in that position for 2 years now, and she has done a tremendous job. And I said publicly in one of our meetings about a year ago that Dana's efforts and dedication are redefining what it means to be a true zoo friend. And I can stand here today and say that she continues to move the zoo forward in a great way, and we're very, very grateful to have her partnership.
Before you leave, I'd like to add to what Sam said about how much I personally appreciate the responsiveness that you personally have given to the concerns we had. I was pretty outspoken a few years ago about what I thought about the relationship between the city and the zoo and the taxpayers, and I could not be more pleased with what's happened since then. I really believe that we've made some really significant strides, at least in my opinion we have, and I appreciate, and your involvement has been key to that, I believe, and I appreciate personally. I want to thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We have a great team, as all of you know. Zoological trustees are a great group to work for. The OZS board members are very excited about the zoo and really focused on what they can do to move the zoo forward. And we have a great team, really proud of our staff, and it's a great time to be involved with the Oklahoma City Zoo. But thank you. I appreciate that, sir.
A great zoo. It really is an outstanding world-class zoo. And it's a zoo worthy of the thunder.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm here today to ask you to consider an amendment to our financial support agreement signed between the City of Oklahoma City, the Oklahoma City Zoo, and the Oklahoma Zoological Society. We have researched and reviewed our peer institutions, and we are asking for an increase in our membership levels. Our junior level would increase by $5, and then all the other levels would increase by $10. The slide before you, the majority of our homes are in that family category. With the $5 increase in the junior category, we only have about 500 juniors who are signed up for that, but we have about 15,000 family members signed up. So we're making it easier for them to continue their Zoo Friends membership in many different ways. The $10 increase is important in that it would bring back about $200,000 to the zoo. And as you know, the Oklahoma Zoological Society pledged 2 years ago that we would give 100% of membership dollars back to the zoo. We have far surpassed that for the past 2 years, and we're very proud of that. But this additional $200,000 will go straight back to the zoo. We will continue to do our membership campaigns where we have partnerships with corporations like Mathis Brothers. That Mathis Brothers Corporation will actually bring the membership levels back down to what they are now. Mathis Brothers pays a portion of the membership, and then the family pays a portion of the membership. So we are still in that range that our members are used to. We also have a 78% retention rate. And that is very important to us, that we do not lose those members. Our community loves the zoo, and we, the Oklahoma Zoological Society, is here to support the community that loves the zoo as well as support the zoo. So we are upgrading our website. We're making different areas in peak seasons for the specials to run. Our member acquisition campaigns will come in peak seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter, and each one will offer a discounted membership. So the memberships are very important to the zoo, but we also realize that the importance of the memberships is as important to bring in our private partnerships. Our members receive about $1,000 worth of benefits just from one membership. We also offer member preview nights, and we offer special passes and 25% discounts, and our upper levels even offer a gift card for them to use back into the zoo. We do the quarterly newsletter, which we talk with the zoo, and the zoo gives us the information that they would like us to get out to the members, and we basically offer the members that chance to come in and truly be a part of the zoo. $5.80 out of every membership last year went to conservation initiatives worldwide. That is becoming a huge program. Our members are asking, how can we help? How can we help our zoo, and how can we help the animals in peril outside of our zoo? So the membership program is strong and steady, and we want to continue to provide that program at its highest level. The private partnerships that I alluded to, they're vitally important. The 100% of membership dollars back to the zoo is a great goal, but that's the bottom of our goal. We are looking for 150, 200, 300% dollars back to the zoo, and we do that through private gifts. Private gifts funds our Zoo Fund for Kids program. It has hit over 320 Oklahoma children in the last 7 years. We bring them into the zoo. We offer the schools the opportunity to apply for grants. And we are working with a partnership with the Oklahoma City Public Schools Foundation that every school will receive applications, and they'll understand the importance of applying for them and getting back into the zoo. So we're very fortunate, and I've always told everybody that there's no way we could achieve everything that Oklahoma Zoological Society does without the community, without the amazing staff of the Oklahoma City Zoo. And I just feel fortunate that I get to sit back and look and watch my friend and colleague, Dwight Scott, take the zoo to new heights. And everything that I do and everything that my staff tries to do and everything that our members are getting behind is such a powerful, really important message. So today I just wanted to bring up the financial amendment, and as well as answer any questions you may have about Zoo Friends.
Any questions? Yeah, Larry?
Yeah, you mentioned partnership with the Oklahoma City School Foundation.
Yes.
But that school foundation just handles I-89 school district? Am I correct in that?
No, you're not.
That's the whole city.
They are not restricted to that district. Most of what they do is that district, but they consider themselves a foundation for the entire city.
Okay. So your efforts are reaching out to all the school children in Oklahoma City, not just I-89.
That is correct.
That's
we are also this is a prototype. If we can get it into the Oklahoma City Public Schools Foundation, then we can move to the Putman City Foundations, and then we can move to the rural schools. So we're really putting it to where can we get that impact, and where can we get it started, and then take that program further.
Yeah, I think I reflect Larry's comment, though, that we have 24 districts, and we do like to see everybody get involved, but it sounds like you're doing what you can.
I'd like to add to tell you what I said to the director a moment ago, because what has been accomplished could not have been done just with the director's side of it. It took the society side changing their views on things too, and I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Any other comments, questions for Dana? All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, so we're voting on item 8F, first of three concerning the zoo. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Now item 8G, this approves the Zoo Friends membership policy changes.
Second.
Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. And item 8H, this approves the admission changes. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Yes, Dwight?
I'm just going to take this.
Okay. We're on to item 8I. This is claims recommended for denial. Is there anyone here wishing to speak under any item listed under 8I? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 9 is claims for approval. There is one. Cast your votes. Item is approved. Item 10 is items from council. Gary, you want to get us started?
Well, of course, I want to wish everybody watching and council and city staff a very Merry Christmas and a happy holiday season. For those of us that watch us regularly, we're not meeting next Tuesday, so don't tune in, but want to wish everybody a happy holiday season. And as always, I noticed we have a scout in the audience, and I'm assuming it's working on a badge for government or something. Won't you come up real quick and tell us who you are and where you go to school and what badge you're working on? It's always great to see this coming in, because if you want to focus on creating government in the future, the kids are where you need to work on it with. So step up there and tell us who you are.
Pull that
mic
down
where we can see.
There you go.
Hi, my name is Nick Linding. I'm working on a communications merit badge.
Okay.
What school do you go to?
St. Eugene's Catholic School.
Very good. Well, congratulations. I'm sure you make your dad very proud. Is that your dad with you today?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Okay. Sam? Larry?
Just Merry Christmas.
Pete? Brian?
Jim, if you could we get some kind of a ballpark date on when we're going to see construction equipment on Southwestern? The patience of the citizens are running thin, and it seems that from idea to implementation on Southwestern has taken much longer than some of the other areas of town.
Happy to get your construction schedule on that.
Skip?
Well, I didn't say it while they were standing up, but I will like to commend Dana and the whole operation of the zoo, from the Zoo Trust to the leadership of both the zoo and the Zoological Society and the Friends of the Zoo. Serving on the trust, it's been a real delight to see an organization work together the way that they've been able to work together, and to improve the presentation and the relationship that exists now with the City Council and the zoo and the whole partnership program of the zoo. And so I just want to commend them for the great work that they're doing. And I know the issue of the price increase, as Sam has expressed, it definitely has a meaningful negative effect on a lot of families. But when we look at what they really offer, that is not a cost-based entry to the zoo, I think we have to be proud of the fact that even that $1, as much as it is to a lot of families, that the various programs that's offered throughout the year, and as he stated, I don't think you can find too many other places in these type of events or these type of programs where you can go and you can bring your own food as opposed to having to buy from the concession stands that they have. So we are lucky to have the leadership of Dwight and the leadership of Dana to really have a zoo that compares, I think, in reference to a lot of the zoos in the United States that charge probably 2 times to 3 times more than what we're charging for entry to the zoo. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and that's all I have to say.
All right. Pat?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd just like to take a moment to update the council and our viewers on the progress being made to involve the City Council in the development of our school system. Sam Bowman and I were both appointed to serve on the Long Range Planning Commission for the school. They've completed their report. It will go to the Board of Education late January for their approval, and there will be an implementation team or teams put together to implement some of the strategies that the committee came up with. I think the committee came up with some really game-changing ideas. The difficulty now will be implementing them. We saw last Monday, a week ago, yesterday, the first step in that when the school board unanimously approved a move to a continuous learning calendar, which was a major change in the way schools in Oklahoma City have been operated forever. And I think that is indicative of the kind of thought process that's going on with our school board right now and our administration. And I think our involvement has been helpful, and I hopefully the school board thinks it's been helpful as well. But I think it indicated to me that our schools in Oklahoma City have made more progress probably than they've been given credit for. And I think, if nothing else, what may come out of our involvement is an opportunity for our citizens to be more aware of some of the quality steps the school has taken in the last couple of years. I think we'll continue to be involved, and I think it reflects one of the objectives in our plan that we adopted last week. And I think it also reflects a very high level of interest and desire for our Oklahoma City schools to perform at this very top level. In addition, I wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday, and a very prosperous and joyous New Year. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thanks,
Mayor, on Councilman Ryan's note about school board direction, I think another opportunity, Pat, that came from that 5 or 6 session working plan was the opportunity for the council, ourselves, representation, to begin that relationship development with the school district that truly you've had it as mayor, but that we have not had as a council, and has opened the doors. And I know Pat felt, I certainly did, welcomed at all levels, board members, parents, school officials that were part of that planning team. And I think the welcoming and engagement is a very meaningful part of where we can move forward. And we started off about, 3-4 months ago at one of our workshops with it got conveyed as a little different tone, a little confrontational, but all that was moved through in these work sessions, and again, an opportunity to begin putting together partnerships and accountability. I mean, it's not just how are we going to provide more services to the school district, but through an accountability process that takes our involvement, not just standing here and saying you need to be accountable. We've got to be part of that accountability through our partnering, and it felt good, and it felt like that first big step was made through that process.
Thanks, Pat. City manager reports.
Thank you, Mayor. This morning we're going to have a presentation from Rick Kane to talk about the alternative analysis process that's being done right now, and also an update on the hub study. Councilman Bowman had asked for an update, I believe, on both of those items, and Rick is here to update us.
Well, thank you, Mr. City Manager and Mayor and Council. Before I get started today, I do want to recognize some folks who are in the audience, though, who are playing roles in one or both of these processes. Behind me to my right, Doug Tennant. Doug is serving as the project manager for Jacobs on our hub study project. Also have Doug Rex and John Johnson from ACOG, who are also have been involved in the entire process relative to the alternatives analysis as well as the hub study. And there are also a couple of members of the MAP Streetcar Subcommittee that I wanted to acknowledge this morning. Jill Adler and Mark Gibbs are here. They, too, have been involved and interested as we have moved through our process talking about streetcars. And so, again, these are all folks who have participated in the process and very interested and been very helpful. I want to start with just a quick review this morning in terms of how we got to where we are today. It was back in 2005 when COTPA contracted with Carter Burgess, which has now since been renamed Jacobs, to do what we called a fixed guideway plan, which was really a major transportation system design plan. We worked very closely with the City Planning Department and ACOG to identify what we perceived to be growth centers that would occur from 2005 to 2035, taking a look at where we thought housing would develop, commercial, retail developments, employment centers, And from that, trying to take a proactive approach to really identify solutions to transportation issues, which included improving mobility, providing enhanced transportation options to people, enhancing the economic development opportunities in the region, and also to improve air quality. And this truly was a regional plan because the study area included north to Edmond, south to Norman, east to Midwest City, and then west to the Yukon border. And I want to acknowledge that Mayor Cornett served as the chairman of our Fixed Guideway Steering Committee, and also Councilman Bowman and Councilman Moore served as committee members during that process. Coming out of that study, there were 11 different corridors that were identified that we felt warranted future study, had merit to take a deeper look at it and see what we could do with those. Each of these corridors, as it came through the study, also had a recommended technology that they thought was the best fit to meet the transportation needs. Those included things like commuter rail, what was a relatively new technology at the time called bus rapid transit, and then also modern streetcar. Coming through the process, there were a series of recommendations that were made as to where do we go next, and included in that, one of them was that we need to entertain a regional transit discussion about transportation. How do we improve it? And you might recall there's been some presentations to you about the regional transit dialogue that took place that was coordinated by ACOG, again, incorporating not only Oklahoma City but our surrounding communities to say, how do we grow our transportation system? How do we improve it? And look at that on a regional basis, not just a single city carrying the burden. Also, one of the 11 corridors was identified as the Central Corridor. It was focused in the downtown. The technology that was suggested for that Central Corridor was a modern streetcar. And then finally, there was also the recommendation that we need to develop an intermodal hub, a hub location that could serve as a network to connect these various proposed transit technologies. The federal government has been a funder of public transit initiatives, and one of the things that we are going through called the alternatives analysis is one of the steps in that process of trying to secure federal funding. The federal government has very prescribed processes that you need to go through with multiple steps within each of those, and we are currently working on what would be called the Downtown Circulator. It was really chosen for a couple of reasons. One, it serves as the core to develop a network, moving from the downtown and growing outwards. Also, it was one that was self-contained within Oklahoma City. When you think about trying to make connections to Edmond, or even more so to Norman, you get into multi-jurisdictional issues, not only on the city issue, but as you move to Norman, you're even talking about multi-county jurisdictional issues, which only complicate the process. And so, based on that, our focus was to take a look at the downtown core area. The study area for the alternatives analysis, in contrast to what's going on with the MAPS process, is more than just 5 or 6 miles. Again, we are looking in terms of how we can grow this system, and so we're not limiting ourselves to the discussion simply on what you've heard as part of the MAPS process, the 5 to 6 miles of streetcar. Ultimately, what comes out of this study is what we would call a locally preferred alternative, which identifies not only a specific route, but it also identifies a specific technology. With that, we make a submittal to the federal government in hopes, again, of potentially securing additional federal funding to grow our transportation system. Once again, Mayor Cornett is serving as chairman of our steering committee, and Councilwoman Sawyer is one of the participants of our steering committee. The AA process has several steps. I said the feds are very specific in terms of the things you have to go through. There's really about 4 key remaining steps that we need to do. One of them is, obviously, we need to identify a route and the technology that we think is most appropriate for that route. We also have to develop a financial plan, which includes not only the capital costs for this, but also the operating costs, and then we need to do a cost-benefit analysis. We also have to do a user benefits, and part of that user benefits is a ridership forecast. And then finally, that leads to our locally preferred alternative, which is our final submission to FTA. Under the previous administration in Washington, the way these projects were evaluated was principally on ridership and cost effectiveness. With a different group in Washington, we have been told that some of the ways in which these criteria will be used to evaluate have been changing. There's going to be more importance put on to economic development and sustainability issues. I was advised yesterday that sometime in 2011, the Federal Transit Administration is going to propose new regulations. Those regulations should speak to economic development and livability in terms of how we would evaluate streetcar projects. It's significant because when the focus was on ridership, fixed guideway projects like rail projects lean very heavily to those that were identified more in terms of commuter rail, those that went into the suburbs and brought people in. A downtown circulator is not necessarily designed to carry high volumes of ridership. It's there to make it easier to move people around, and they tend to have, significant economic development potential, not that they create it as much as they support it. So we will be monitoring, I will be monitoring very closely with some of my peers who are very interested in streetcar projects to watch how this proposed regulation is presented and making sure that we make comments that are in the best interest of the city. One of the key elements of the AA process is ridership. The Association of Central Oklahoma Governments has been working now for well over a year to develop a new ridership travel model, or a travel model, I should say, which makes allowances for multi-modes. Generally, that travel model previously was keyed to automobile traffic. One of the things that the FTA requires is, as a city or as an entity introduces new public transportation options, they want to know what impact those options may have on the travel in that community. And so as such, ACOG has been going through a very comprehensive process to develop that travel model, and as late as last week, we were getting an introduction now in terms of how that model works, and it has been turned over to our consultants who are now starting to work to develop those ridership forecasting numbers. During the time that this travel model was being developed, we were somewhat in a holding pattern as the AA process was moving forward, but there were a couple of other significant events that occurred. One of them, which obviously was the passage of MAPS in December of 2009, also the initiation of Project 180. And recognizing that, especially when you're talking about Project 180 and tearing up streets in the downtown area, we knew that actually offered some opportunities to potentially maximize some cost savings by being able to do some things that relate to the streetcar while the streets are being torn up, and at the same time we wanted to minimize future disruption. There's no question that when you entertain construction activities, there's going to be disruption, but we thought there's some things that could be done potentially as Project 180 moves forward that could minimize that disruption later, not only to the businesses that will be along the streets, but also to just the population or the public that's moving around in downtown. Given that, we started an initiative which we called Let's Talk Transit. In March of last year and continuing into May of last year, we had a series of meetings. There were 7 meetings over the course of that time period in which we encouraged public participation. These meetings were generally in a workshop type of a presentation style where the public had an opportunity to come in, learning about certain variables, certain operating criteria, to make suggestions and to help design routes in terms of where did they think the streetcar system needed to address in terms of transportation, or I'm sorry, in terms of destinations. Also, they were answering questions relative to how far are you willing to walk to get to the streetcar, or once you get off the streetcar, how far are you willing to walk to your destination. There's some other operational issues in designing routes that they were also introduced to, and we were very much interested in their feedback. We also conducted a number of electronic surveys during that process, again, to further encourage public participation in the process. And then we also had a very active website where people could come in and ask questions, and not only do that, but we also had recorded all of our meetings, and we put them on the website so that if someone didn't have the opportunity to come to the meeting, they could go to the website and see exactly what was being presented. So we found that website to be very beneficial, and we got a lot of feedback that came through that, as well as we had extremely good attendance in the meetings. We were very encouraged by the level of participation that occurred in every one of those meetings. Building on the Let's Talk Transit plus additional public input that we've obtained, the Alternatives Analysis Steering Committee has gone to work and even broke it up into what we called a working group made up of those steering committee members to, you say, evaluate and redesign different routes as we went along and got that good dialogue and feedback. This concept that you see in front of you this morning is the one that kind of rose to the top based upon the last round of input from the steering committee. Again, this has been a dynamic process. These things are changing. This is not proposed as a final route, but rather this is the latest version of what we see coming forward. It's made up of essentially two pairs or two couplets, one of them that runs Broadway and Robinson, and the other one that runs Robinson-Hudson. This design really addresses several issues that have come up throughout the discussion process in terms of getting near certain activity centers, being sensitive to where parking is located, also talking about addressing the distance between the lines in terms of how far people are willing to walk, and then potential economic development opportunities that are presented. Again, this is more of a core concept. There's lots of options that you can build from depending upon how the city develops or what the local priorities might happen to be. For instance, we see here an option at the north end that is really northeast 10th or 10th Street, I should say, and 13th Street, servicing the area known as Midtown and getting close to St. Anthony Hospital. Another way to look at that area might be to just go east and west on 10th Street, either as a single track option or perhaps a double track option. Same thing on the south side using Sheridan. You could do a single or a double track option to get into the Bricktown area, or perhaps given the development of the park and the new boulevard that you could come south down to the boulevard and then access Bricktown via that way. Again, these are options that the steering committee has been considering. None of these are fixed, as much as, again, being sensitive that this is a dynamic process and there's a number of ways that we can go. I mentioned that the alternatives analysis is just not a 5 or 6 mile project, that we are also looking as to what makes sense. How do we grow the system? We've had a number of meetings with representatives from the Health Science Center, the various agencies that are located there. This is one example of how we might be able to make that connection. In our meetings with them, they were very specific in the sense that they were very concerned that we have a connection to the downtown transit center. Many of the people that you might consider their customers actually travel by bus to get there. And so they felt from their perspective that they wanted to make that connection with our transit center that's roughly at 4th and Hudson. So what's next as far as the alternatives analysis is concerned? Well, over the next 2.5 months, Jacobs has a significant amount of technical work that they're going to have to do. As I mentioned, they're going to need to document the development of the routes and also the technologies that will go with that particular route. They have to do the user benefit study, again, which includes that ridership forecasting element. We need to develop a financial plan that includes that cost-benefit analysis. And then we are planning to conduct additional public meetings to further public input opportunities. And the city actually has initiated, and they're going to be working with Jacobs, to do an evaluation of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe bridges. There's been some concern because of the height restriction that those bridges present to the streetcar process. Some of our preliminary analysis indicates that, that based on the foundations of those bridges, we may have some issues that we're going to need to figure out the best way to deal with. Whether you're talking about using electric-powered streetcars or something that is non-electric overhead wire power, we still have an elevation issue that exists with those bridges when you start talking about putting rail in and the excavation that might be necessary. So there's further analysis that still needs to be done on that. It is a significant issue that we're investigating, and again, the city has been working with Jacobs to help further that process. And finally, COTPA also needs to develop what's known as a letter of no prejudice. This is a process whereby the federal government, once we garner their approval, allows us to move forward with work. In this case, it might be the MAP streetcar, and being able to leverage those funds as local participation to match federal funds. So it's one of the steps in the process we've tried to continue as we move through this AA, being sensitive to the MAPS process, which again is separate, but yet they're very, very closely intertwined, and we want to try to make sure that we don't do anything that might limit or inhibit our ability to gain additional federal funding. So that is something we've all been sensitive to, and I would suspect probably sometime in early 2011, I'm going to say February, March time period, we would probably be working to put that letter of no prejudice together again, trying to just protect ourselves so that we can take advantage of any of the MAPS expenditures that we make to help further as local match to federal funding opportunities. In summary, as it relates to the AA, based on the timetable that Jacobs is working with, we would hope to have a route coming out of the steering committee for the alternatives analysis by March or no later than April, and we would make a final submission to the FDA probably sometime in June is my guess. And I can stop there if there's questions about the AA, or I'll move directly into the hub study, your preference.
Rick, I've got to make some comments about this. I was one that was never really wholeheartedly supportive of the downtown streetcar system to begin with. Only when the hub was made a part of it did it become attractive enough to get my vote to send it forward to MAPS. And as the process has gone forward, I've become less enchanted with it today than I was when I was barely able to vote for it to send it forward. The cost of it and the fixed nature of it, to me, is just it's just one of those ideas that I think we're going to regret as time goes forward. I don't take this. You've done exactly what you've been tasked to do, and done a good job of it, and I appreciate it. You've been open about it. This is a good report. But as I see it going forward, and I see what the cost of it's going to be, and how few people it's going to serve, and how much better that money could be spent on overall transportation things, I'm just becoming. I'm much less enchanted with it today than I was. I don't think it was. We thought through the connection between it and 180 at the time. The timetables between the two overlap to a point. There's bound to be a tremendous amount of loss, even though I think everything possible after the fact has been done to try to mitigate that cost loss. I just I think we're going to regret this project. I don't think we're going to regret the hub study. I don't think we're going to regret making if we put a transportation system in downtown that would work. But I think we're going to regret spending $120 million on something that's fixed, that only serves 5 or 6 miles downtown, when one of the big things about rail transportation is the economic development that goes along with it. We're putting it in an area that is virtually already developed. Very few opportunities exist in this area for economic development compared to an extended line that might run someplace else. at the risk of having to agree with Ernest Istook, the rubber-tired system to me is a better answer over the long pull than a permanent $120 million in-the-ground system that we don't have any idea what the ridership's going to be. We don't know what the maintenance costs are going to be. I'm more disenchanted with it today, not based on what you've told me, but based on the process of what's going on. The more I find out about it, about where it's going to be, what's the cost of putting it in the ground, the permanence of it when it's put into the ground, the difficulty and the cost to expand it, I feel we're going to live to regret this, and I want to be on record now, after the fact, after I already voted for it once, of saying that I regret doing that, because I think we're going to live to regret this. I think it's going to be so expensive. It's going to, I can't, we're spending all this money downtown on walkability, and yet we're concentrating this thing in an area where we want people to walk. We're spending $120 million, which is a risky investment at best. I think we could do better, and I don't want you to take this or any of the people that worked on this as a personal comment, because I think each of you have done what you've been tasked to do and done a very good job of it. I think it's our fault, and I think we will regret it when somebody later down the road, somebody that's sitting in this seat 5, 6, 10 years from now is trying to figure out how to pay for the upkeep on it, and regretting the fact that it's not a more extensive system to bring people into downtown, not a system to circulate the people that are already here. We have a very compact downtown. We don't have a big downtown like Chicago or some of these cities. Even cities that have compact downtowns like ours have backed away from these systems. Fort Worth, as I understand it, just backed away from a similar system because they didn't like the fact that it was in the ground permanently. They didn't like the cost of it. They were worried about the ridership. They've backed away from it. I just think before it's too late, we ought to all rethink. I think we can still be consistent with what we promised the voters in terms of a rail system and make it one that has a possibility of working, as opposed to one that it's at counter purposes. You got one. It's at counter purpose with 180. I'm going to be redundant, which is my long suit, but it's at counter purposes with 180. It's at counter purposes with walkability. It's at counter purposes with the idea that we ought to be doing things that are sustainable financially. Even in your comments, you said we've got to do this in such a way that we can continue to get help from Washington, because we know it is not going to work financially. I would be remiss if I didn't say how I feel about it. And again, I appreciate it. And I want to hear what you've got about the hub study, because that's the part of it I like.
Mayor,
yes, Sam.
May I just on top of that, one of the things that Pete addresses is the fixed route being tied to that section, highly developed section or well-developed section of downtown, period. I know that the box of the north-south, whether it be Robinson, Broadway, Hudson, whatever the north-south box is pretty well fixed, that major portion of the system. But has anything, other than looking east and west, has anything been looked at south in terms of the spine, called the spine that would extend this box further or closer to the south to the river, where in time the development's going to come and it's going to make sense to have some kind of system, moving system for residential development on the south to get into that box downtown. It probably feels like a line to nowhere at this time, because there's nothing there, little there. But in terms of future development that's going to happen, we all know is going to happen at the south end of that spine on the river. Has there been any discussion on maintaining that fixed box of whatever that is, 3, 4, the major 5 miles of the system, with an extension south?
We've certainly had a discussion about an awareness of getting down to the river, and as the initial development plan for the Coeur d'Alene area was developed, COTPA, I should say, worked closely with that group in terms of trying to identify that this was going to be less of a car environment and more of a public transportation environment. So we're certainly sensitive to that. As we've worked through the alternatives analysis thus far, the focus has been more north of what would be perceived as the new boulevard, primarily because we see the development of that south area, that Coeur d'Alene area. Number one, it's going to be driven significantly by private investment as opposed to the public monies. Number two, we also see that as a very extremely long-term plan. And so right now there's so many unknowns that we really didn't try to sit down and design how we're going to service that area, other than to recognize that probably something like Robinson is going to be a major thoroughfare to get us down to that part of town. But we've not spent a lot of time trying to decide just how we're going to, again, beyond getting down Robinson or something like that, what we're going to do down in that area. But it's purely because we just see that as being off into the future, and that there's other areas north of the boulevard that we could service more immediately.
My remarks were more directed to the key opportunity to serve as a catalyst for that development, knowing it's going to be a while down the road, but really a catalytic action by going south.
Yeah, Larry?
Yeah, switching gears just a little bit, Rick, the alternatives analysis study has been going on for quite some time, and there's been a tremendous amount of knowledge gained. The subcommittee that the mayor has appointed for transit under MAPS 3 has, I believe, had, what, 2 or 3 meetings up to this point?
2.
2, okay. How are those two going to tie together? Because is it not going to be the subcommittee's responsibility to analyze the facts that are involved and to present to the MAPS oversight with public involvement and with the council's preliminary involvement to come up with a recommended route?
Why don't I answer that one, Rick?
How's that going to tie together?
I've been involved in both processes, and I've been very consistent in communicating to the Alternative Analysis Committee and the MAPS 3 subcommittee the different roles that each plays. It's important to note that the alternative analysis is the second stage in the federal process, the one that began with the fixed guideway study. It's a requirement if we're going to eventually qualify for any federal funds that might substantially increase what we're able to do. The Alternative Analysis Committee has no budget for implementation of anything that they design. However, they are making some suggestions that will go on to the MAPS 3 subcommittee. The MAPS 3 subcommittee is not reliant on the alternative analysis. They're not restricted by the alternative analysis. They can start from scratch and start completely over because they have the funds generated by the penny on the dollar sales tax to actually design and build the MAPS 3 committee. There are members citizen members that are on both the alternative analysis and the MAPS 3 subcommittee. The idea there is to try and give some sort of synergy between the two processes, but they are separate processes. One is to help us get in line for some potential federal funding. The other is to actually deal with your subcommittees on MAPS 3.
Well, I understand that, but I guess my concern is the alternatives analysis has got those 2 rectangles that you have some projected routes. I'll use the term projected routes. And it would seem to me that whatever the subcommittee comes up with should have the same projected routes that the alternative analysis committee should be. There shouldn't, for example, it's a north-south orientation in there. What if the subcommittee came up with an east-west, and now we've got a plan that says for our downtown modern streetcar, we're going to go east-west, but we've got a document here, alternative analysis, that says a different direction. Don't those two have to be the same at some point in time?
I think ideally, and in that case, I think the alternative analysis would probably go back and have another meeting and discuss where they go from there, and I'll let Rick follow up. But the MAPS 3 subcommittee is starting from scratch. This is their baby as far as building the transit. They are not reliant on the alternative analysis committee. But that's one of the reasons I had people that served on both committees. So I tend to think there'll be some overlap there, and there won't be an issue like you're describing, but it's potentially there.
And I will add to the mayor's comments, at the last meeting of the MAPS subcommittee, they were they got a briefing as to where the AA was at today. They're also looking to have a significant number of working meetings, probably 2 over the course of the month of January, specifically to take a look at this information and react to it and build upon it. So, yeah, there is a very definite interaction that's taken place, and we would propose that by the time we get to the end of the AA process, that what is coming forward out of the MAPS process would mirror what the AA would move. Again, we may take the AA a little further in terms of what we present, because we're not completely restricted by that 5 to 6 track miles that MAPS is working with, but they need to mirror each other. It doesn't do us any good to take a totally separate process forward, especially if you're looking to leverage that funds. I mean, there's environmental process is the next step, or an environmental study is the next step in the process that we need to do. And so we need to be sensitive that environmental work that we're doing is consistent with what the city is developing as part of the MAPS process.
Rick, yes, sir. From what you've said earlier about the federal involvement, is it then pretty much a given fact that if this ever comes to be what we had thought it would be, as far as a system running, we're going to be forever dependent upon the federal government for the operation of this, for the continued operation of it?
I think we need to be careful, because right now when we talk about any federal money that might come to Oklahoma City as part of an enhanced transportation system, we're really talking about capital dollars. The federal government does not propose or does not permit the use of federal monies going into operations. So whatever we develop from a NAPS perspective, the city has to pay for that operation. What we're looking at from the federal perspective, again, is trying to enhance or grow our transportation system, so it would be monies that would be afforded for the capital side of that expansion.
The Obama administration has expressed a desire to start putting some operations money into local governments, but they haven't done that, and that's not been the policy in the past. It could be a new trend.
And I
One of the
think
things I think we need to be careful of, I mean, we talk about being conservative. Everybody wants to talk about how conservative they are. Yet here we are talking about getting money from the federal government to pay for something here that we then have to finance the operation of, that we're not sure is going to pay for itself. I mean, where's the conservatism in that? I mean, I think we need to be intellectually consistent when we're talking about what we're doing here. If we're talking about going to get money because it's there, we've got a really great example. COPPA's got a really great example of going to get federal money and then taking money out of operations to fund it for something that doesn't pay for itself. We've got a huge one. It's in our budget every year. We pay for it. And I just don't think that makes sense. I think the idea of chasing these federal dollars because we can get them, if we can't finance it on our own later, I don't think that's conservative. I think that's being foolish. I think that's being financially foolish to do that. I'm not talking to you, Rick. I'm talking to whoever's looking at me out there. But I think that's a mistake, and I hear that all the time here. Well, the federal government's going to do this. What is that about? Where's the intellectual consistency in doing that? I mean, we're the one. Our taxpayers here have to pay for the financing of this. If it doesn't make financial sense, then to me, that ought to be the first question, not the last question. The other thing, we look at this way these two triangles are concerned. We listen to what somebody's saying. They want that to go through our transit hub, which is now located at 4th and Hudson. We've got a hub study, and ideally the hub would hub everything. Yet we're going to put a permanent track down, and part of the reason we're putting it there is because it goes through a hub system that we would hope at someday would move to another place. to the permanent hub where you hub all your transportation, so that if somebody comes to Oklahoma City, they get in that hub and they can get on a streetcar system, they can get a taxi, they can get a city bus, they can get the Amtrak, they can get the commuter rail, they can get to whatever. Yet we're spending this $120 million routing it through a hub we've already got that only hubs buses. I mean,
we have a couple of people that have signed up to speak. Rick?
Can I make a couple quick comments before we get there? A couple of things. First of all, we are running the modern streetcar as proposed in the alternate that you have there. It does go up by the existing hub, by the existing transit center. It also goes up by the Oklahoma Memorial, which is not anticipated moving. That will probably be there forever. I think it's safe to say that almost all public transit is subsidized in some means. There may be a few routes somewhere across the country that pay for themselves, but it's darn few. Almost all public transit is subsidized. As we went forth with the MAPS 3 scenario, we put together a project that was to be funded with MAPS 3 and anticipated to be operated by the city. There wasn't federal dollars anticipated in that project at that point in time. What we are trying to do is put together a program that could be leveraged and have federal dollars to bring into it. And so that it could happen without, it could happen, but we believe it would be foolish not to at least make that accommodation possible in the future. And as far as putting and addressing development that may or may not happen with the modern streetcar, there are a lot of downtowns that are not vibrant. Being downtown and being successful is not a given. Bricktown's doing well. There are a lot of entertainment districts across the country in metropolitan areas that aren't doing well. And if it takes a streetcar as an asset to help make that successful in the future, I think that's something that needs to be considered as we go forward. That there are challenges on keeping downtowns vibrant, and this is just a piece, hopefully, in an overall plan that includes conventions, includes quality of life, entertainment, and an employment base, and people living downtown, and hopefully some retail. All that is part of the fabric to make a downtown vibrant. It isn't one piece, but it's a challenge to making your downtown vibrant, and this is just a part of making and having an active and vibrant downtown.
Jim, I don't want anybody to misunderstand. I understand that transit is subsidized. I vote for it every year, and I've not regretted that. I regret being put in position to subsidize transit when it doesn't provide transportation for regular people that want to get from point A to point B. That's the problem, and I'm afraid that's what we're doing here. I mean, if I need a streetcar to take me from here to the First National Building, we sure as hell don't need to be spending all this money on walkability. I mean, you could call me a cab and get me to the First National Building for less money than this is going to cost. Every time I want to go, just get me a cab. Because there's not enough people need to go from here to the First National on a streetcar to make it make sense. And that's my point.
Anybody else? Rick, we're glad you're here. I'm not sure the feeling's mutual, but we appreciate you coming down. No, I was reflecting. I'm not sure that Rick's glad he's here.
Oh, no, I enjoy it. It's good dialogue. No, come on.
Rick, what else have you got for us?
Let me move on quickly to the intermodal hub and just talk about what's going on there. There was $10 million included in the MAPS process for, in part, to pay for an intermodal hub. This hub has more of a purpose than just simply to be the connecting point for all of these proposed various transportation modes. Obviously, it is there to promote movability, and it also is to enhance the image of public transportation, but it can also serve as a catalyst for economic development. The process is being coordinated by the Associated Central Oklahoma Governments. They're taking the lead in this hub study issue. Again, Jacobs is the consultant who's doing the work on this. It's being paid for by a combination of funds, both from ACOG and COTPA, the city, and then ODOT is also contributing some money. Councilman Bowman is serving as the city's representative on the advisory committee, and they have had a couple of meetings thus far. Coming out of the two meetings, the first meeting that the advisory committee had was one to start talking about sites in general. What sites should they look at in terms of a preliminary Tier 1 investigation, you might call it. Given the input from the advisory committee and then also from Jacobs and their team members, they came up with 10 sites, and we've identified those here, that they thought merited at least an evaluation as a first cut. They identified some criteria. One of them was the ability to provide access to the various transportation modes. Second was a civic presence by creating a sense of place with the hub site. Economic development potential on vacant and or underutilized properties. And then finally, auto pedestrian access. Given those criteria in terms of evaluation, they then established a evaluation system based on poor, good, and excellent, a rating scheme. And from that rating scheme and significant dialogue that occurred at the last Hub Advisory Committee meeting, those 10 sites were reduced to a series of 3 locations, which is what now Jacobs will be going into much more detailed analysis on in terms of what might be a good site for the intermodal hub. Site A that I've referred to here is really a combination of 2 of the 10 sites that were recommended, one of them being both of these are east of Main Street and identified either as the Bricktown parking lot that runs east and west, kind of behind from the railroad tracks towards the Bricktown Police Station, and then the Buffalo Statue site. This was not the top choice of the advisory committee, but it certainly has good rail access. It also is adjacent to uses that are transit supportive, and it does have a good connection. Again, I mentioned parking, and it has a good connection to the Santa Fe parking garage. So it was one of the sites that will be continued into the next level of analysis. Site number B is a combination of 3 different sites. The Santa Fe Station, it was quickly recognized that the Santa Fe Station, even if it was expanded north and south, is probably not going to be large enough to serve as the intermodal hub. However, when you think of that site in partnership with these 2 additional sites that were identified, a parking lot that's just north of Reno adjacent to the railroad tracks and a parking lot that's south of Reno adjacent to the railroad tracks, it opens up all kinds of possibility, and it really was, I think, the favored site of the advisory committee. And finally, site number 3, which was referred to as the lumberyard site. This is one that, because of its size, offers the potential for the high-speed rail connectivity. It also, because of its size, offers additional development potential. There is the one downside is access, given that it's going to be south of the boulevard and some elevation issues. It may present problems relative to access either through the streetcar or pedestrian access, but these are things that, again, come out in the next level of evaluation as to the merits, both pro and con, for any of these individual sites. So given this is what Jacobs is going to be doing as part of the next process. The intent is that given these sites, they want to have a public meeting in January. At that public meeting, they'll be sharing this information and getting public input in terms of what people are thinking about relative to the intermodal site. They'll also be conducting some detailed engineering and land use evaluations, trying to make sure that we've determined the technical requirements that are necessary to be included in developing ridership forecasts to see what kind of potential this individual site would have. Talk about property acquisition needs that might be necessary based on any of these 3 proposals. They need to do a capacity and a demand analysis, again, being sensitive to the future in terms of what kind of demand would be put on the site location based on number of trains that might be going through or buses. Again, the intermodal hub was not just to serve as a connection for a streetcar or rubber tire bus or a commuter rail project, but we need to think long-term, whether high-speed rail comes to Oklahoma City or not. You want to think about that. You also want to think about taxis. You want to think about intercity buses like Greyhound, and you want to talk about bicycles. You want to talk about pedestrian access. So the intermodal hub is really multifaceted, and we want to keep all of those on the table as we go through the analysis of this site. Right now, Jacob's game plan is that they want to try to finalize a recommendation relative to a site location by April. April is kind of a timetable that we've been looking at on the alternatives analysis standpoint, the hub study standpoint. We know that the Convention Center Site Location Group is working to come up with something perhaps in the springtime. So we need to try to start getting some answers as to where certain things are going to be located and what's going to be going on. And so we've kind of focused that time frame as far as these two transit projects are concerned to look at that April, late May, April time frame. And with that, Mayor?
When do you expect the Hub Committee's recommendation to come forward?
Doug? April? Yeah, it'll be April time frame. I mean, based on their schedule right now, that's what we would see. But again, we've got a lot of dialogue. I mean, they're also very interested in what's happening with the alternatives analysis process, and so we're working kind of in partnership here on some of these projects.
Great. Any other comments or questions for Rick? Yeah, Sam?
Mayor, as a member of that Hub Advisory Committee, along with representatives from Midwest City, Edmond, Norman, ODOT, the railroad companies, some other transportation gurus, I just wanted to say to the people present here today from ACOG, Doug and John, as well as Doug Tennant from Jacobs, the member from Norman, the mayor's representative from Norman, is one of our outspoken vocal people on ACOG, and said to me after the last meeting that finalized this recommendation at this point, this part of the process, that she was very skeptical coming into this process. Discussions from Norman about how it was really going to be more than, an Oklahoma City fixed economic development opportunity. And after this part of the process and the give and take at the committee meeting that resulted in some of these combinations that weren't presented, came out of the committee's dialogue, she said that as far as she was concerned, that she was laying to rest any whitewash job that she thought might have happened in this. So Doug Tennant from Jacobs and Doug and John Johnson, we left, the whole group left at that part of the process with that refinement to this point with, I thought, a very good positive response with regards to the critical and professional nature of the way you've approached it to this point. Compliments you.
Any other questions or comments for Rick? All right, Rick, thank you. Thank you. We have a couple of people that have signed up to speak on this issue. Jill Adler.
Told I'm supposed to give my name and address.
You are. Thank you.
My name
Dr.
is
Jill.
Jill Adler. My address is 21 Northeast 3rd Street. I'm a member of the streetcar subcommittee, and I actually had a nice little prepared speech. I was going to commend Rick and ODOT for their efforts to obtain public input, and also the Alternative Analysis Committee for the amount of effort that they've put into coming up with a kind of a recommendations and plans for us, and I was going to tell the council how much I was looking forward to presenting them with a route suggestion in the near future. However, Councilman White, I would like to address some of the things that you brought up. And I'll start with the story. Please feel free to haul out the hook if I go too long. But I moved here from Denver, and I moved here pre-maps. And when I lived in Denver, I didn't have a car. Wasn't really because I was terribly green. My parents were cheap, and I went to college there, and they didn't think I needed a car. And after living there for multiple years, I discovered that I was really happy without one. I used public transportation, and I had no difficulty getting around the city. I also walked a lot, and I was really excited to hear people talking about plans for walkability. I moved to Oklahoma City, and the very first thing I had to do was buy a car because I could not get anywhere without a car. And what I discovered was that in a very short period of time, I actually became terribly dependent on my car, to the point that I was driving 3 blocks to visit friends, I was driving 4 blocks to go to the grocery store, I was doing all sorts of things in my car that when I lived in Denver I walked to. About 2 years ago, I moved downtown and I started walking. And very happy to live here. We walked downtown, we walked to Thunder games. And so when I started going to I decided to go to the Let's Talk Transit meetings because I was very interested in transit downtown. So I thought, I live over in Maywood Park. I thought, I'll walk to the meeting. And the meeting started, I think, about 6 o'clock. It was a nice spring day. It was light out. And so I walked. And I started thinking about what it would be like in our compact downtown to actually walk from the Santa Fe station to a job, to walk from Deep Deuce or Maywood Park to the Art Museum. And I discovered, and I think if anybody wants to do it themselves, it's a lot longer walk than you think. You think, oh, it's 2 blocks, it's 3 blocks, it's 4 blocks. We have very long blocks. And I was kind of huffing and puffing by the time I got to the meeting. And so I thought, you know, people in Oklahoma who've been driving cars are going to have difficulty with this concept of, oh, you know, let's come into the hub and let's walk everywhere there is to walk downtown. I think one of the things that a streetcar can do is I think it can remove that distance for people. I mean, I hate to say that we're lazy, but I think we are. Right now, when people come to all of the wonderful things that we've built with maps, they drive. You know, you drive to Bricktown and you park, or you drive to the Santa Fe garage and you park and you go to a Thunder game. One of the neat things that we could do with a streetcar is actually link all of these maps projects, and we could actually make it almost a network so that you could, you know, park at Bricktown and you could take the streetcar over to the new city park. You could take the streetcar back, you know, if you wanted to go to Midtown to have lunch. There are a variety of things that you could do, and I think you could almost create an organic downtown. Now, the other thing that I think is important is that putting mass transit downtown does not limit people walking. I don't know yet, because obviously we don't know where the stops are going to be, but people have to walk between stops. If you have a couplet system like the one that was drawn, you actually probably, if you want to go north, if you're on one street and you want to go in an opposite direction, you're going to have to walk a block. And we were talking about the whole concept of creating almost a mall concept with these couplets where, you know, let's just say Broadway and Robinson, for example. You may have gotten off on Broadway and you want to go the opposite direction. You're going to walk over to Robinson. And so you've got kind of a wide block that is available for development. And I think also one of the things that's important, yes, there is development on Broadway. There really isn't a whole lot on Robinson, but a lot of the development on Broadway are office buildings and things like that. I'd like to see more shops. You know, we've got coffee slingers and things like that, but I'd like to see the opportunity to create development that draws people to those areas. And on Robinson, there's very little that you're going to walk to. So, you know, I think if we developed businesses on Robinson, again, you've got people strolling downtown, kind of like they did, like I've heard they did in the past. The other thing that I think is important to realize is if we bring trains into downtown that come to the hub, we really have no way for people to get from the hub to their business. I mean, in cities like Chicago, people hail a taxi, and it's true we do have taxis, but we have to call a taxi. We don't have taxis circulating. You know, and the thought of coming in from Norman and then walking over to a payphone or getting my cell phone and calling a taxi to take me over to a city council meeting, you know, that's an unwieldy concept. Whereas if I could get off of the hub and hop onto a streetcar that's going to take me exactly where I want to go, that makes, you know, downtown feel compact to me. Whereas if I'm walking or I'm calling a taxi, I feel like it's a big space. I'm also a woman. You know, we wear high heels when we get dressed up. I didn't today, but, you know, long distance walking is more difficult for us as well. People are in business suits. They don't want to get sweaty in the summertime. we do have inclement weather, and so I think, I just think that, to have a streetcar will afford us the opportunity to really open up the downtown for people to use, visitors, people who work downtown and live downtown.
Since you're talking to me.
Yeah, I'm trying to talk to everybody, but...
I'd like to comment. You misunderstand. I'm not against transportation downtown.
Right.
I'm against $20 million a mile for transportation that can't be changed. That's what I'm against. I'm not against transportation downtown. There are other buses besides these unwieldy-looking trolleys that we've got that never have worked. There are other ways to do it besides that, but not at the cost of $20 million a mile. That's what I'm opposed to. We have people in this town that can't get to work because they can't afford it, because we don't have an extensive enough bus route to get them yet. And yet we're willing to sink $20 million a mile to get you from Robinson to Walker. I mean, that's what I'm opposed to. Don't misunderstand me. Do not misunderstand me. I'm not opposed to downtown transportation. I have consistently voted to subsidize all the transportation and advocated for more of it. What I'm opposed to is what I consider a wasteful expenditure of $20 million a mile to do a fixed system. And that's what I'm opposed to. Not getting you from Walker to Robinson. I'm all for that. But I think we can do it for less than $20 million a mile.
And, I am not the person to rebut you at all. At least coming here, again, from a place where I took buses, or going to Chicago. My daughters live in Chicago. We ride buses all the time. People of all walks of life ride buses there. Here, we have a completely different mindset. And I don't know how to change that mindset. I mean, I think most people think, oh, I can't ride a bus. That's something other people do. And I think and with a lot of expense, I agree, but I think one of the things a streetcar can do is it can open up the concept of mass transit to people who would never consider using it. And I think that if you get people from Oklahoma City to come downtown and ride the streetcar and then stop at the hub where they see buses going, all of a sudden it kind of opens up that whole concept of, I don't have to use my car. And I think one of the most important things about mass transit is getting people out of our cars. We've done a miserable job of that in Oklahoma City. And I guess I see this as kind of a catalyst for mass transit. But, as far as the expense, I'm probably not the person to address that.
Jill, thank you. Brian, you can go ahead and comment.
Yeah, I would be... I've been sitting here trying to hold my hands because a lot of this was talked about 12 months ago. It's not a new concept. We talked about the cost per mile, the operating expenses. It was all talked about. It's not new. So it's not something that just came up. We should have addressed it back then. The second thing is I think the issue that I have with one of the comments she made was, how do we convince people to get out of their cars? I'm not sure that's your job. My car is an extension of my freedom. And the idea that I will be dependent on government to move me around is something that I'm not going to do that. I mean, our cars are an extension of our freedom. And it's a convenience, but it's not our job to convince people to get out of their cars and take away that freedom. So I couldn't do my life on public transportation.
Yeah, but Brian, government subsidizes the streets and the fuel that goes into your car. I mean, so it's subsidizing your transportation. Yeah.
First of all, I would like to thank Ms. Adler. I know you have a great deal of passion and empathy for this project and for the concern of the growth of the city of Oklahoma City. There are some people that just make a lot of noise, and there are some people that are outsiders and really are advocates for their own personal agendas. But I can tell everyone on this council that the Adler family has been involved in the growth and the concern of the projects of the city of Oklahoma City for as long as I've known them. And, I was surprised to see a family that lived in the far north part of Oklahoma City that one day I was out jogging and I saw her walking her dog down on 2nd Street in the Deep Deuce area, and I stopped and I'm going, "What are you doing down here?" And her comment was, "We have moved to be closer to the downtown Oklahoma City development, and we're we're proud of the great things that the city of Oklahoma City is doing." And so, you know, we all have our differences, and I think that your presence here today is obvious because you're concerned, and you're one of the persons that walk the walk and talk the talk. And so I'm just, you know, delighted to see you here today, and I would like to wish you and your family, your husband and your children a very happy holidays, and continue to be a part of the participation and the growth of the city of Oklahoma City. And one way or the other, we're going to get this worked out. I mean, but this is what government is. I mean, it's about dialogue. It's about differences of opinions, and I just want to thank you for coming today, and continue to be a part of the programs with the city of Oklahoma City, and thank you for serving on the committee.
Mark Gibbs.
Hi, I'm Mark Gibbs, 601 North Broadway. I'm with Urban Neighbours and the Modern Transit Project. And first off, I'd like to thank the Mayor and Council for appointing me to the MAPS-3 Transit Subcommittee. It's a great honour to be able to serve the city in this capacity. There's an excellent group of people on the committee that are very informed on all aspects of downtown and of transit. And we have already hit the ground running, and we're moving forward. I had some remarks, and I wanted to get into some of the mechanics of the interaction between the streetcar committee and the alternatives analysis, all the works, all the projects, surveys, studies, that are going on at the moment, and how they're all coming together in a great way for early May, spring, early May, early summer next year. But I want to take on the issue of transit, and I want to take on the issue of streetcar head-on. I would say to you that we have a very, very poor transit system in Oklahoma City compared to other cities around the state. The greatest respect is to Rick and his staff and what they do. They're asked to do too much with too little. We see transit polled the highest in pre-MAPS planning, and it polled during the election as one of the most important aspects of the MAPS project. People who are and I say that term, use transit, as well as people who are not, see that it's an embarrassment, our transit system in the city, and are determined to do something about it, which is why it polled so highly. Now, how do we go about that? The MAPS system is set up for capital projects. The bus system desperately needs to be expanded, desperately, in terms of the level of service and the routes that it serves. But the MAPS project is not set up for that, because most of the bus service is operations. It's not just the bus, it's the fuel and the staff and the cost to run the system. The streetcar, although there is a relatively high capital cost, has a very low operating cost. So one of the concerns about where do we find the money to maintain this, it is a very low cost system to operate. The streetcar was a tractable project for MAPS-3. As Rick alluded to, it's something internal within the city, and that's important. I want to come back to that point about interacting with other municipalities. It's a project that I firmly believe, and many other studies will show, that is a great economic development tool, and more than pays for itself in development that comes into it. I know I've had discussions with Brian on this, and we can revisit that if necessary. It is fixed, and that is one of its great benefits. It is fixed. It is in the ground. People do know where it goes. Developers can see that. People can plan for that. The biggest problem with the rubber-tired trolleys we've had is because of problems finding operational money, they've had to be shifted around. The routes have not been fixed. It's been confusing to citizens and to visitors alike. The streetcar is the first component in substantially improving transit for the city and for the metro area. It's an important tool to distribute people who come in on commuter rail to places of employment. They don't all just work at, let's say, next to the Santa Fe station. So reaching up to St. Anthony's and the Health Science Centre, and hopefully onto the Capitol at some point, is important. A good example of another city that received money for in a transit system at the same time as us was Salt Lake City. We received money for a rubber-tired system. They received money for a light rail system. They've also gone ahead and developed a commuter rail. And the great thing about that is their commuter rail drops them off to the inner-city transit system, the light rail system, and distributes them. So I see the streetcar and the hub and the commuter rail as very much intertwined. At the moment, we've got the streetcar in front of us. We're getting on with that. The hub study's moving along great. The streetcar will introduce people in Oklahoma City to transit, to modern mass transit. And I think that's important. There's a whole class of people that very rarely ride public transit. And studies have again shown that they're much likely to ride a modern streetcar system than they are to ride a bus system. And most importantly, those are a large group, and I'm referring essentially to the middle class here, a large group of voters that will be prepared once they see something successful to vote for further improvements in transit. And as I said, I keep coming back to we want to build up all of transit. We want to build up the bus system. We want to build up commuter rail. And I go straight to the gorilla in the room about commuter rail. That will require a significant step forward in terms of political leadership throughout the area, not just within the city, but within the neighbouring communities. The RTD work that Doug has staffed and moved forward, we've got a great plan worked forward. It's come forward a consensus about what kind of taxing authority, taxing district that would mean. That is, I'm sure Brian will be able to chime in, that is a very important issue if we're going to be raising some kind of new tax, and that will require a lot of political leadership and it will require a lot of political support. If we see transit working successfully, that is definitely the next step and an important component of moving forward in that. I'll try and wrap up very quickly. The MAPS Transit Committee, we are very much aware that we are independent of the alternatives analysis process. We're moving very quickly. We've received all these excellent reports, and follow the transit analogy, you wait for a long time for something to happen, and then 3 very critical reports come along at once. Those are the alternatives analysis work, the hub study, and the convention centre study that Councilman McAtee was talking about. We'll be in a position to probably identify a good route that will move forward through the system from ourselves and the subcommittee to the advisory board and then on to the council. And as Councilman McAtee said, we're not necessarily building the thing now, but it's very important planning. That allows Project 180 to go forward and some of the steps they're doing at the moment and say, right, this corridor is protected. Let's say it might be Robinson and Broadway. That corridor is protected. We can be working in these other areas, and we can come back to that Robinson and Broadway, the last part of the Project 180. So I'm very impressed with the commitment from city staff, and Eric, I don't believe is here today, Eric Wenger, but I really think things are coming together to optimise what we're doing downtown, to minimise disruption, and to come up with the best system. Robinson, as you can see, is clearly evolving as a very important street, the spine, the north-south street. And one of the great things about Robinson is it is one of the streets that runs all the way through from 10th or 13th, through downtown, and on, and this is important, on past the park, on over the river, and potentially onto Capitol Hill. So I believe that Robinson, one way or another, will strongly come out as an important street. I will try and wrap up there. There's a lot of issues here, and we're working hard. We're working very hard now to move things forward. A lot of great opportunities, and we look forward to working with you. And I'm sure you may have some comments at this point. Thank you,
Mark. Thanks for your work on the Alternative Analysis Committee and all the other projects that you're involved with. Any other comments from council on the alternative analysis and the hub study? All right, on to item 11B of the City Manager Reports, which is a presentation on the on-street bike route improvements.
Dennis Clowers is here this morning to update us a little bit. We had a plan that was adopted by council a while on the on-street bike routes. We've been in an implementation mode here recently, and we did have an issue that came up on the signs, and the authority and ordinances backing up those signs. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dennis.
Mayor and Council, I just want to try to hit some of the highlights that were included in the report that was included in your packet. Also here today is Randy Entz, who's a transportation planner with the Planning Department. Randy's office worked with Public Works to get this first phase of implementation of the bicycle transportation plan going. When the bidding documents were being prepared, the manual on uniform traffic control devices was being amended, and a draft of that new MUTCD had been issued. The bidding documents were issued, and a contract was awarded based on that draft, which showed a bike route sign in a certain way, had a bicycle symbol with the wording "Use full lane" under it. After the contract was awarded, the final revision of the MUTCD came out, and it had added a words which said "may use full lane." So we have our code requires that all of our signs should be in conformance with the MUTCD. We've got an ordinance in place that really doesn't clearly define what a bicycle route is, or what the cyclist's rights are and what the driver's rights and duties are. So we've got about 508 signs that have been fabricated. 88 of them have been installed. We told the contractor to cease work until we give him further instructions. The cost to make the change on the wording on the signs is just under $18,000. It's our recommendation that we go forward with refacing those 508 signs, get the 88 that are already up, down, and refaced and put them back up, and to have the municipal counselor's office proceed with drafting an ordinance that will give us the language we need to enforce the condition that we have out there. I'll be happy to respond to questions.
Comments or questions for Dennis?
When might we see this ordinance revision?
I think the legal department is working on a draft right now, so I'm guessing within the next month.
And between now and the time that ordinance is adopted, there will be no activity on the signs?
Well, I think we should probably go forward with having our contractor make the changes on the signs.
Regardless of whether the ordinance passes or not? What I don't want us to do is to get in the same situation we're in right now, having done something that we can't do.
Right. But we have 88 signs up right now that we don't have an ordinance to enforce. What your suggestion is that we wait on
Well, it just seems like, and to avoid getting into the same situation again, we don't know what the ordinance is going to say yet.
We can certainly.
If it's as soon as 30 days, Pat, I don't stand.
Well, that's fine. If it's 30 days or a month or a week, or whatever it happens to be, I don't think we ought to go forward with fabricating additional sign until we have a clear understanding of what the ordinance will permit us to say.
That's fine. I'm fine with that.
Just a suggestion.
The contractor's been on hold for some time anyway, so we can just tell them to not proceed until the ordinance is enacted.
Well, I just think it's out of abundance of caution to avoid the kind of issue we got into before, when apparently we didn't have access to city codes when we designed the signs.
Do we know what the ordinance is going to be? I mean, is there any language that we're looking for that will justify the continued placement of these signs?
Yes.
But you're not going to
I don't have it in front of me, and I haven't read it closely enough to. But I know we've satisfied Cindy Richard. So once you satisfy Cindy Richard, we know we have something you can enforce. So we're very close to having the final ordinance, and we'll probably be able to bring it to council in January.
Because I would hope the ordinance would clarify the right of the bicyclists to use the full lane wherever they want to do it.
Yes.
Not just on the designated bicycle lane.
That was one of the very points that was discussed. Right now, there's kind of it's a 3-foot rule that a car can go around it as long as they give the cyclist 3 feet. But I think and that was one of the points Cindy had when she reviewed it. So I think we're really pretty close to bringing it to council.
Larry, are there any rules in reference, any language as it relates to the cyclists themselves? It seems like, and whoever listening, I don't want nobody to take it that I'm jumping on the cyclists, because I support, cyclists and all outdoor activities. But it just seems like that we spend all this time addressing an issue as if the cyclists never have any wrong. And if you're going to tell me that if I see a bicyclist, I know to stay behind the bicyclist and not run up on the bicyclist, okay? But what about the bicyclists that want to pass? Are there some restrictions in reference to lane usage, in reference to passing, that they should be accountable for?
I don't do that stuff all the time, but I do. My recollection is a cyclist is supposed to observe the rules of the road. So, I mean, technically, when you have a stop sign or a red light, they're supposed to stop.
Okay. So why are we spending all this money on this issue that's common sense issues as it relates to a vehicle and a cyclist obeying traffic signals?
Let me just try to that response.
Okay, but before you go any further, and I don't want to leave this alone, but I'm going to go ahead and add this in. Whoever designed these signs, I'm driving to work Monday, and from Britton Road to 63rd on the service road, there are 8 bicycle signs on the west side of the street on a service road. And then I pull into the parking lot of the office complex, and there's a bicycle sign in the parking lot of the complex. Why do you have to have 8 bicycle route signs in 1 mile area?
I can't answer the question about the parking lot, but I believe the number of signs on the service road that you're talking about has to do with the functional classification of the street. Is that correct? And it has to meet the AASHTO guidelines.
The functional classification of the street?
Right. Whether it's a collector or an arterial, a major arterial, a minor arterial.
So a service road within a mile distance, a mile of a service road, you have to put 8 of these signs that you say that we're making. 8 of those signs situated on one side of the street? That just don't make any sense. Beg your pardon?
Their placement is determined by the AASHTO, which is the federal guidelines. So we follow the AASHTO guidelines for the type of street and other characteristics of the street, how many intersections, things of that nature.
There's no intersections. If you go to Britton Road and you go south on the service road and you go all the way to 63rd, you got 1 intersection, Wilshire.
Driveways as well. So, but I mean it's the AASHTO guidelines is what we follow, the federal guidelines for how to install them.
Yeah. Larry's been very patient. Larry, you want to jump in?
Well, I have another, and Jim, I think I need you and to hear this if I could. And what Skip was talking about, we're talking about a lot of warning cars that there are bicyclists out there, and does the bicyclist have any responsibility? I had a bicyclist promote to me an idea, is there some way that we can make bicyclists more obvious to cars by some type of attire that they have to make? Would you pass that along to staff to see if there's any other communities that are identifying the bicyclists on a public road so that they're easier to spot? And I know that's not quite what our conversation here is about, but I wanted to get it before the public that I am aware that this idea has been broached.
We'll research that. I'm not aware of that, but we'd be happy to research that and see if that is done in other places.
And then the other thing, if I could make one more comment.
Sure.
Hopefully, what we're talking about here does not communicate, because we got a flood of emails in the last time we did anything on this signage, that we, the council, we're not going to put signage on streets to make bicyclists safer. And that's not what we're talking about here, are we? We're just talking about what procedures we know to go through in the most expedient time to get the right signage on the right street so that we have as protected a situation as we have. So please, bicyclists, don't tell us we're not trying to put signage out there. We're just trying to do it right this time, aren't we, Dennis?
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Sam?
Yeah, I guess, Dennis, this is part of the public education that, we're going to be doing for some time. And I think the more of it, the better. I'm going to try again, though, with Councilman Kelly's concern about why do we put just the underlying reason for why we do signs, not where they are, or yes, where they are, but not how close they are. But just why are we investing time in these signs? Right now, under the rules of the road, our city ordinance, the state ordinance, you can ride a bike on any of the 10, 12,000 lane miles of Oklahoma City right now without a sign. What this 2-year process did to identify, and we've got 500 miles eventually, but the first 200 miles of signage that's paid for is to identify those streets that have the best road conditions or better road conditions, are safe to travel, provide connectivity to logical trails, whatever the parks, schools, connectivity points. That's the purpose for the signage, and then to encourage by the signs bicyclists to use those routes, those streets. Not that they can't go out at their own risk and ride anything they want, but for reasons that we've taken over a period of time and study to define those routes that we want to encourage people to use. That's the reason for the signage.
Sam, trust me, you have done a yeoman's job as it relates to this project, and I'm not challenging that at all. All I'm saying is that it seems like that we create places that nobody's going to use anyway. And in all fairness, the bikes at the lake, the trails, and all the two Hefner and Overholst, just an example. And then at the same time, you create all this signage on the city streets when they have a safe place to ride at the lake, right? And all I'm saying is you could do this for basically every activity. I'm challenged with an area where people use the little scooter, the motorized wheelchairs. But I can't get anybody to understand that because there's a high percentage of people that live in a senior citizen's, home that's have a lot of individuals who have to have this as their only means of transportation to the grocery store and to the drugstore, to put maybe a little sign in that area that lets drivers and people understand that this is a high traffic for that type of movement.
Yeah, Larry?
Not to get into a debate, but I think one thing historically we need to keep in mind, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but in the 2007 General Obligation Bond Program, the voters voted X millions of dollars for on-street bike trails.
That was part of the GEO bond program.
And part of that program then was to try to make those on-street bike trails as safe as possible, which this signage issue is all part of that 2007 bond program. So the voters approved this option back in 2007.
I didn't say that the voters did. I didn't say nothing about the voters. First of all, I think a trail is a designated path. A designated path. Now, if we were going to do something right, why don't we just create some designated bike lanes?
I wish we could do that, but they, by comparison, are just high dollar.
The voters, did they vote for us to put up signs, or did they vote to put in lanes?
I'm sure it was the road signage. It was not lanes. We couldn't have done, but we're going to do with the I think it's 400 or 500 miles with the GEO bond issue and street signage. I doubt we could do 20 miles with lanes. as much as I'd like to do them.
You know, in some part, I'm taking a position with Councilman White. It just seems like if we're going to ask for money to do something that creates something for the safety of the bikers, then why don't we look at creating some bike lanes? That is, to me, a trail. If you say you're creating a walking trail, that's a designated trail. If you say you're creating a jogging trail, that's a designated trail. But to say that you're creating a trail on a public street that the car and the bikers and the walkers and the runners all use at the same time, that's not a designated bike lane. And just because the sign is up there is no more than saying the speed limit is 45 miles an hour and somebody driving 60 miles an hour in it.
I hope, Mr. Kelly, when we get to the workshop in February, that with regards to traffic and transportation, that you'll be supportive of a policy consideration I'm going to suggest with regard to street widening projects, that we use such opportunities to create bike.
This man right here can tell you that on several meetings in reference to Hefner Road that I have said, why are we spending this much money and we can't put in a widening to create a designated bike lane for the bikers that ride from I-35 east to Jones and back on Hefner Road. But we're going to spend millions of dollars, do a resurfacing on Hefner Road, but we can't create a space that I understand that Councilman White at one time was the leader of creating a bike lane, designated lane, on some streets in Oklahoma City that we no longer have. And I just think that's the most practical and the most safe way of spending the money and saying to the cyclists that we are trying to be compassionate in reference to the safety of bikers. But to tell me, matter of fact, the ones that got painted in the street, it's just so confusing. Who drives their car looking down in the street? It just don't make visible sense. If you want to do something, put it up on the sign. I think the best sign that we got is the sign that says share the ride, share the lane. The yellow sign that's posted up on some streets, everybody can see it. Everybody knows. You might see a bicycle come down, so you got to be compassionate to the cyclists. But
and we can do that. We can do that, Mr. Kelly, with a policy change.
Okay. All right. Dennis, you have more?
No.
You're just standing there in case? All right. Thank you, Dennis. All right. City manager reports is over.
Mercifully.
All right. Citizens to be heard. Fanny Bates. Good morning.
Hi, my name is Fanny Bates. I live at 701 Northeast 15th. Before I say what I got up here to say, I'd like to say that I'm really tired of coming to these meetings and seeing somebody with an English accent or an Australian accent that knows nothing about our culture getting up here and telling us what they think we ought to do. They don't know anything about our history. They just sound silly. I hope you don't think because somebody has an English accent that they know more than us Okies do. Now, what I got up here to say is about the Oklahoma City State of the City speech, which will be given soon. To me, this is one of the most important things that we have going in Oklahoma City every year. I always get excited about this and can't wait for it. I am you all know I'm a 61-year-old school teacher. I get to pay $75 to go see this year. Dr. Ed Shadid, who has invested millions of dollars in Oklahoma City, who lives in Oklahoma City, he gets to pay a lot to go to this year. All us teachers and doctors and people who provide services who live here in Oklahoma City for generations and pay taxes for generations and raise our kids here, we get to pay $75 to go to this. And you all know that the Chamber of Commerce is the majority of those businessmen in the Chamber of Commerce do not live in Oklahoma City. They come in here and they run their payday loan services and charge us 144% interest. They run their bars. They run their liquor stores. They run their arcades that teach our kids how to kill cops and steal cars. And then they go back out to Nichols Hills and Edmond to spend the night, every night, and invest their money in Nichols Hills and Edmond, the money they got from us. And so they get to pay $50 to go to this. But us people who live here in Oklahoma City, who love this city and dedicate our lives to this city, have to pay more than they pay. It just doesn't make sense to me. If I don't get to be there, if I don't come up with $75, I hope you're going to say that there's 40 less police officers in Oklahoma City right now than there were in 1990. I hope you're going to say that we have not had a police academy in 18 months. I hope you're going to say that we normally have 2 police academies a year. You know, we've got problems in Oklahoma City, real problems that these people with an English accent don't know anything about. And I hope that you are working for us, the people of Oklahoma City, and not for those rich business people out in Nichols Hills. Sometimes I can't tell.
No executive session today?
No, sir.
All right. We're adjourned. Thank you.